Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. The 4 members that made up Team 12 of Takaka and the 4 that made up Team 7 of Kanahagaka were walking a small pond. The 2 eldest members of the group then approached each other. Have you spotted anything unusual? Guo asked, looking at the male in front of him. No, I haven't seen anything ever since we got here, Kakashi said, looking at Go. I know it's a little strange. I think we may have been given some bad information, Go said, looking at Kakashi. It's possible. Then again, we still have a few days left. I wouldn't underestimate our opponents. It could be quite fatal, Kakashi said, looking at him. Yeah, I guess you're right, Guo said, looking at Kakashi. 3 men then walked up to the 2 of them. Who are you? Guo asked, looking at each male closely. We're here to take your place while you and your teams go on break, one of the males said, looking at them. Kakashi turned to his team when he heard this. Sakura, Sasaki, Sai, seems like we get breaks. You 3 can quit patrolling now, Kakashi said, looking at them. Sakura sighed when she heard this and walked over to a nearby stump. I don't see how they all do it. The only one who seems to be out of breath beside me is Shiru. Sakura thought as she looked at her team and the team that she was currently working with. Na sat on a rock with Fu coming beside him and taking the seat next to him. Tired Na? Fu asked, looking at the blonde. No, I'm not. But why not rest while we have the chance? Na said, looking at his green-haired friend. I guess you have a point, Fu said as she leaned back slightly. Na did not notice what the female had just done, decided to also lean back, and when they did, their hands touched slightly. The 2 pulled their hands back, each having a slightly red face and not looking at each other. Neither of them said anything, and Na moved his hand back to where it was just a moment ago. When he did, he once again felt a hand. This time, however, he moved his hand over the top of Fu's. After a few seconds had passed, Na got nervous. However, that nervousness faded when Fu turned her hand around and laced her fingers with his. It's a nice day out, isn't it? Na asked as he looked up at the clouds. When he did, he felt a head suddenly make itself known on his shoulder. Yeah, it's a really nice day out, Fu said, letting her head rest on his shoulder. Kakashi, seeing this, smiled under his mask. Well, it's nice to know that leaving Konoha wasn't a massive failure for Na. Kakashi thought to himself as he looked at the 2 in front of him. I wonder if Jiraiya already knows about his location. Kakashi asked himself as he looked at the sky. So, you see it too, huh? Kakashi suddenly heard a new voice say from behind him. The silver-haired male looked behind him and saw Shiru walking towards him. Yeah, it's not hard to tell how they feel about each other, Kakashi said, looking at the younger male. They look just like Obito and Ren, Kakashi thought, looking at them. So, you think that there will actually be an attack? Guo asked, looking at the male in front of him. It's hard to say, but we shouldn't let our guard down, Kakashi said, looking at the male in front of him. Of course, we shouldn't, Go said as he noticed the raven-haired male from Konoha walking towards Naruto and Fu. He stopped just in front of them, gaining the attention of the 2 that at the moment were still sitting on the rock. Hey, Na, mind if I speak to you in private? Sasaki asked, looking at the blonde. Oh. Huh? Sure, I guess, Naruto said as he got up and followed the male to a more private location. So, what's up, Sasaki? Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. Are you Na Uzumaki from Konoha? Sasaki asked, looking at the blonde male in front of him. Na looked a little confused and grew a little nervous. Yeah. Don't you remember? You were the one that helped me escape. Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. Yeah. I remember. But the thing is, you're supposed to be dead. Sasaki said, looking at Na. When he said this, the blonde's eyes widened and he looked at Sasaki. What do you mean I'm supposed to be dead? Na asked, looking at him. Well, a week after you left Konoha, the Hokage got a report that they had found of the burnt body of a child that matched your description. Several different people analyzed the body, and they all came to the same conclusion. That boy was supposed to be Naruto Uzumaki, Sasaki said, looking at the male in front of him. Why would they think that it was me? Na asked, looking at him with a very confused face. Well, like I said, the body was burned, so they couldn't recognize it in the least. So, they found that he was malnourished like you were. He was around your height and he had a seal on his stomach just like what you have, Sasuke said looking at Na. Na placed his hand on his stomach at the mention of the seal. It's true that he always had that strange marking on his stomach, but he had never actually thought anything of it. So, how did everyone take it? Na asked, looking at Sasake. Well, most of the village celebrated for an entire week. The shops were giving out free food and candy. And then sake was being passed around like it was a daily occurrence. Then some others like the Hokage just went into solitude for a while. The teacher at the academy actually was in his home for a month straight, not leaving to go to the academy or to even buy food. He just kind of shut down for an entire month. Sasake said looking at the blonde in front of him. They celebrated my death. Guess I shouldn't be surprised. After all, the entire village except for a few select people hated me. So, it actually makes sense that they would go crazy and be happy that I'm gone. Although, it is nice to hear that there were some people who were upset to see me leave. I just didn't think they'd be that happy that I was gone. I mean, they treated me almost as bad as this village treats Fu. The only difference is that I'm not Ingi, Naro thought. And near the end of his train of thought, it all clicked and suddenly made sense to him. Those hate-filled stares the nights they would drunk and beat him while calling him names like demon and monster. It just all made sense after that. Na then looked down at his stomach. Then those markings are. I'm just like Fu. Na thought to himself as he looked back up at Sasake. Well, thanks, Sasake. I guess it's good to know that someone actually cared about me, Na said looking at him. Sure thing, Sasake said looking at the blonde. I'd also like to thank you for your help all those years ago. Without your help, I'm not sure I could have left Konoha. So, thanks, Sasake. It really means a lot to me, Naruto said, looking at the male in front of him. However, if the two of them had been paying closer attention, they would have noticed the male that was just a few trees away with that ever-present smile on his face. So, this really is the Naruto Uzumaki from Konoha. Well, then, Lord Danzo will be very pleased to hear about his location. Sai thought as he walked back towards the lake. As Naruto and Sasake walked back to the large lake, they suddenly heard the sound of kanai flying through the air. The two jumped forward and looked back to see that there were several kana in the ground. The others, of course, heard the sound that it made when it hit the ground and everyone looked at them. When they did, several men appeared in front of Naruto and Sasake. Seems like I missed. Well, guess I good thing that I usually don't miss twice, the man said as he launched another kanai at Sasake. When he did, he saw that the male's eyes had turned red and that there was 2 tomo on his eyes. Seems like we have someone rather special here, boss. How much do you think someone would pay for those eyes of his? Another male asked as he stepped forward. Don't know. I guess there's only one way to find out, one of the males said, stepping forward. As he did, Kakashi and Guo jumped in front of the two. Seems like we have another payday boss, Kakashi of the Sharingan. I bet someone would pay even more money for his eye, the male said, looking at Kakashi. I don't know about that. Why would someone pay for just one sharing when they could have a matching set? Another male said as he looked at Sasake. You stay away from Sasuke, Sakura said, looking at the men in front of her. One of the males then turned his head to look at the female and smiled. Hey, boss, I think I'll take the woman, the male said, looking at the pink-haired female in front of him. Kakashi, seeing how outnumbered they were, decided he couldn't afford to hold back. So, he slowly reached up to his headband and pulled up to reveal his 3 tomo show. No matter how skilled you are, it won't do you any good once I get my hands on the hero's water, the male said, looking at the silver-haired male in front of him. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Kakashi said, looking at the male in front of him. 5 more men jumped down from the trees when he said this and they each looked at him. Everyone pick a target and keep them busy while I go see about the hero's water, the male said looking at the figures in front of him. Like the male had said, each of the figures spread out and took on their own opponent. All except for Kakashi and Go, which seemed to have 4 of them attacking him at once. Usually, it wouldn't be a challenge for them, But seeing as how each time it seemed like one of them got the upper hand, so more from the side would step in, they never could defeat anyone. The male that had ordered the others to attack was walking across the lake where the huge tree was. However, Akana suddenly cut off his path. He then looked to the side and saw a green-haired female looking at him. He smiled at this and changed his path so that he was heading towards her. Fu, the Gingari of Takaga. I've heard quite a few rumors about you, the male said, looking at her. Like what? Fu asked, looking at him. Usually, she wouldn't care about some rumors that had started to circulate around her, and that's because she didn't want to get mad and end up doing something she'd later regret. However, this time, it was different. This man wasn't a civilian of Taki. He was a man who had intentions to hurt Taki. So, she didn't really care if she hurt him or not. Just a few rumors about you and a certain blonde, the male said with a smile on his face. He then took his hand and pointed to Na, who was in the middle of fighting someone. Their kanai met each other and Na managed to force the male back. That blonde, if I'm not mistaken, the male said, looking at her. Fu dashed forward at this, not wanting to hear anything else that he had to say. When she did, the male pulled out a cane blocking hers with his own. She started to push the male back just a bit, and he made a forced smile while being pushed back. Judging by your reaction and the way those eyes of yours look now, I'd say those rumors are true, the male said as he pushed her back. Fu wondered what he meant and looked in the lake beside her. When she did, she saw that her usually orange eyes had turned into a pale white color. Fu heard the male beside her suddenly move, and when she looked at him, she saw that he was just a few feet away from her, and reacting on instinct, she jumped back and threw her kanai at the male in front of her. The male smiled and caught the kanai as it went past him. He then once again lunged at the girl, sending the kanai he had just caught in front of him. Fu went to dodge, and when she saw the male just a few feet away from her with kanai in hand, she then felt a sharp pain in her back. This sudden pain surprised her, and as a result, she didn't move when the male in front of her used the kunai to pierce her stomach. This sent Fu into shock, and she coughed up some blood only for a pain that felt the same as before to hit her in several different spots in the back. When she turned her head to see what it was, she saw several shuriken in her back. You know, if you had paid attention to the one extra male we have, you'd notice that he almost never misses and only acts as a support for the rest of us, the male said as Fu fell to the ground. Fu, the green-haired female, heard the familiar voice that she loved to her call out to her. She then looked to her side and saw that Na was running towards her. She then fell back and Na caught her. Fu, you're in bad shape, Na said looking at her. He then began to remove the shuriken from her back and turned her over so that he could look at her. Fu, listen to me. Everything's going to be fine. We'll get you back to Taki and the medics can heal you. Just hold on, Na said looking at Fu. The green-haired female looked up at Na and saw that his usually bright blue eyes were filled with tears that threatened to overflow at any moment. Naro, Fu said as she reached her hand up to touch the blonde's cheek. Please don't cry. You look so much better when you smile, Fu said, looking at Na. I can't help it, Fu. You're my best friend. I don't know what I'd do if I lost you, Na said, tears finally flowing from his eyes. I know it may hurt now, but you're strong. You've always been strong. I can't tell you how many times I've been close to my breaking point, and you were the one that saved me, Fu said, looking at Na. Na suddenly felt a shock wave hit him. When he looked behind him, he saw the man that had done this to Fu with the bottle of hero's water in his hand and blue chakra cloak around him. Na felt his anger get the best of him, and he was about to go over to him. But he suddenly heard Fu's voice call out to him, which brought him back to his senses. Na the blonde looked at the green-haired female, tears once again in his eyes. I know this is a bit selfish of me, but I want you to stay here with me, please. Fu asked, looking at Naruto with a smile on her face. Na nodded and brought Fu closer to him. Fu smiled at this and looked up at the blonde in front of her. Kakashi looked over at Na, who was holding Fu. However, the male with the chakra cloak suddenly dashed at him, forcing Kakashi to jump back. Kakashi landed on the lake and suddenly started to flash through hand signs. However, before he could finish, Kakashi braced himself, knowing that he didn't have time to dodge his opponent. He felt a powerful fist hit him in the gut and he was sent flying into the tree. Go then landed beside Kakashi and looked at the male that was in front of him. So, got any heavy hitters with that special eye of yours? Go asked looking at him. I got a few, but they each take time. Time that he isn't given me. Kakashi said looking at Go. The gray-haired male sighed at this and looked at him. I got an idea. Although something tells me I'm going to have some explaining to do after I use it, Go said looking at Kakashi. So, you have an idea? Kakashi asked looking at Go. Yeah. Just get your most powerful technique ready and I'll make sure he doesn't interfere, said looking at him. You sure about that? My most powerful technique takes some time, Kakashi said looking at the male. Yeah. I should be able to keep him busy long enough for you to get ready, Guru said, looking at him. The male then stepped forward and looked at the male in front of him. I was really hoping to keep this a secret just a little longer, but seems like my hand's been forced, Guo said, looking at him as his left eye turned into a brilliant golden color. The eyes of the Ido, the male said, looking at Go. Well, then, let's see if you're still able to keep up with me, the male said as he dashed forward. Go mirrored his moves by also dashing forward at incredible speed. The two were practically blurs even to Kakashi. However, deciding that he didn't have any time to waste, he started to once again flash throw hand signs and placed his hand below him. If I remember correctly, the eyes of Ido are just power boosters, but it don't last very long. Less than a minute if I remember correctly, Kakashi thought as he lighting started to gather in his hand. The male, seeing this, opened the bottle he had taken from the tree and drank even more of it, causing the chakra cloak around him to become larger and more intense. He then kicked Guo in the stomach, sending the male into the tree and dashed towards Kakashi. Kakashi, deciding that he didn't have any more time to charge his attack, ran at the male and tried to hit him in the chest. The male dodged it, kicked Kakashi in the stomach. This made the male lose focus and the lighting in his hand disappear, and he like Go was sent into the tree. The male then looked to his side to see how many were left. The only one he saw was a blonde standing close to the female he had taken care of just moments ago. He smiled and began to walk towards him. Na looked at Fu. Even in this situation, she was somehow still able to smile. Na, even if I don't make it through this mission, promise me you won't give up, Fu said looking at him. I promise Fu, Na said looking down at the green-haired female in his arms. Good now, Na, there's just one more thing, Fu said, looking at him. Na was about to ask what it was, but was cut off by Fu, reaching up to him and placing her lips to his. When she separated, she looked at Naruto's surprised face and laughed slightly. That's the reaction I thought you'd have. I've wanted to do that for so long now, but it just never seemed like the right time. I guess it's too late to say it now, but I love you. Narokan Fu said as she shut her eyes. Naruto looked at the female in his arms and felt tears once again fill his eyes. Fu, the girl he had just realized that he loved all this time, returned his feelings, and he never even got the chance to tell her how he felt in return. I love you, too, Fu, Naruto said, looking at Fu. She's gone, and I can't save her. The reason I became a shinobi is gone, and it's all their fault. Na thought to himself as he looked at the female in front of him. The male who was only a few feet away suddenly felt a shockwave and looked up to see red chakra circling around the boy in front of him. Guess the Gingariki of Taki is more resilient than I thought. The male said looking at the two of them. However, the male and the others all saw something that made their hearts drop. Naruto's shadow had until now been doing nothing. It had done everything that Na had done. But now the shadow of the blonde started to change. It became much larger and changed in shape until his shadow no longer looked like the blonde boy it was supposed to. Now it looked like a giant fox with 9 tails each swinging in a different direction. Na then looked at the male that was behind him and the male's heart dropped at the amount of bloodlust that hit him when those eyes stared at him. They weren't blue like they used to be. They were now a crimson red with his pupil becoming slitted. I'm going to slaughter all of you, Na said looking at the man in front of him. I'm going to slaughter all of you, Naruto said as he looked towards the leader of the group. The man suddenly felt uneasy. The chakra alone was enough to scare him. What the hell is this kid? His chakra is almost suffocating. I can feel his anger and his desire to just rip me to pieces. I can also feel something else inside of him. Am I crazy? No. There's defiantly something else there. Something evil, the male thought to himself as he looked at the boy. The male, not knowing just who he was up against, carefully unscrewed the lid of the bottle he had and took several more drinks. The more of this I drink, the more powerful I get. It may shorten my lifespan, but I don't drink it now. This boy know this thing will see that my life ends here and now. The male thought as he took several drinks from the bottle he was holding. When he was done, a dark chakra cloak appeared around him. His skin turned red and several blood veins became much more visible. He then looked at the small blonde in front of him and they started each other down for a moment before both dashed forward in a display of speed. The two were moving at speeds that many of the others could not keep up with. Go sensei. What's going on? What happened to Na? Shiru asked as he looked at the two in front of Dash around the field. I don't know. I've never seen him like this before. The gray-haired male said as he looked at the blonde that he had been told was an ordinary kid move at speeds that for someone like him shouldn't be possible. I know what is wrong with him, a new voice said as he approached the two males that were currently on knees. When they turned, they saw that it was one of the males from Team 7 of Konoha. Go wasn't too good with names, especially when he didn't have to remember them, but he thought that this was named Sasaki. You do? Shiru asked, looking at the raven-haired male in front of him. Yes, and now it all makes sense and it explains so much. Sasaki said, looking at the blonde. Well, you can tell us later when we're all out of harm's way, Go said, looking at the young male in front of him. The gray-haired male then turned his head to the male who was on the water and walked up to him. Can you tell me what's going on? Go asked, looking at Kakashi. Well, 12 years ago, Kakashi began only for Guo to cut him off. You can explain that later. What I actually meant was who's winning the fight. Go said looking at the male. It's a little hard to tell. Kakashi said looking at the male. Now, usually he wouldn't have any trouble telling what was going on, but seeing as how he was tired, and he had put in a rather large amount of his chakra into the technique he was going to use, but never got the chance to, he wasn't exactly able to keep up with them as well as he usually would be able to. Then tell me what you think is going, Go said, looking at the male. From what I can tell, Naruto's faster and his chakra is rising rather fast. If he continues to go at this rate, he'll defiantly make good on his threat. Kakashi said as he watched the two males keep exchanging blows. Okay, well that's good to know. I'm going to go check on Fu said as he walked over to the female. He ran over to her and looked down at her. He put his head to her chest. He didn't hear anything which concerned him, but soon enough he heard a slight beating inside of her chest. She's alive, just passed out, Guru thought with a sigh. He then noticed the rather large pool of blood around her and turned her around to see that there were still several shuriken in her back. When he saw this, he started to remove them as quickly as he could. When he did, he watched as her wounds closed and looked at her. Well, it's no wonder she passed out. She's lost a major amount of blood. Na never took the shuriken out, so the wounds couldn't heal. I guess I can't fault him for that one. The two of them probably learned little to nothing in the academy with the way they treated them. Go thought as he looked at Fu. He then turned his attention over to Na and looked at him as he fought. She can survive that as if we manage to get her back to the village before her heart gives out. She fine for now, but she's lost a lot of blood and can only do so much in her current state. So Naruto, if you want to save Fu, you have to end this quickly. Maybe I can help speed up that process. Go thought as he looked at the two males. He then reached into one of his holsters and pulled out a kunai. He looked at them as they dashed around and threw the sharp object at the male as soon as he hit the ground. This forced the male to roll forward and come face to face with Na. He then suddenly felt a sharp pain in his stomach. When he looked down, he saw that Naruto's hand was inside of his stomach. He then looked up at Na and he smiled. You know, I'd call you a coward, but that's not accurate because, Na said as he ripped his hand out. When he did, there was a large amount of blood covering it, and he had several white bones in his hand. You're a spineless coward, Na said, looking at the male in front of him. Within seconds, he fell down to the ground and looked around to see that everyone that had been working for the man he had just killed was now gone. He then looked over towards Go and saw that Fu was in his arms. Na ran over towards him, feeling a slight change in his eyes, a rather painful one at that, and looked up at Go. He looked up at Go, who had a relaxed look on his face. If we hurry back to the village, we should be able to her the attention she needs, Guo said, looking at the blonde. What really? Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. Go nodded and looked towards the white-haired male in front of him. He then looked towards Na and gently passed Fu over to him. Start heading towards Taki. I'll catch up in just a little bit, Guo said looking at him. The blonde nodded and started to run down the path. Go then ran over towards Shiru and looked at him. You too, Shiru, start heading towards Taki. I'll be there when I get the chance, Go said looking at him. Fine, but when we get back, we need to talk about something, Shiru said looking at him. I figured as much, Guro said looking at the male. The white-haired male then started to jump through the trees, and when he did, he saw that Naruto was running along the ground. He jumped down and started to run alongside Na, leaving Go alone with Team 7 of Konoha. Go walked up to Kakashi and he sighed. I guess I have some explaining to do, Kakashi said, looking at him. Yeah, you do, Sasaki said, looking at Kakashi. So, I take it you figured it out as well, Kakashi asked, looking at the young male in front of him. Yan, I'm a little interested in hearing your reasoning for this, Sasaki said looking at the male in front of him. Kakashi then sighed and sat down on a rock. Well, like I said, it all started 12 years ago, Kakashi said looking at the two in front of him with Team 12. As the blonde ran down the path, Shiru looked at him. So, do you think she's going to be okay? Shiru asked looking at the blonde. Why? Yaguro said that if we hurry, we could get her some help and that she'd be all right, Naruto said as he tried to run a little faster. Yudu realized it'd probably be a lot faster if we took the trees rather than running down the path. Right? Shiru asked, looking at the blonde that was in front of him. I know, but if we do that, then I might drop Fu because of how often we're jumping, and I don't want to put her in a worse condition than what she's already in, Na said as he looked down at the green-haired female in his arms. As time went on, Naruto found himself moving faster and faster until he finally got into the village. When he got in the village, he saw that Go and Kakashi were already waiting in front of the hospital. We've already got some of the staff members on standby so that she can be treated as soon as possible, Go said, looking at them. Naruto smiled at this and walked inside. When he did, he saw a small white bed in front of him with several people in front of it. They looked concerned until they saw the figure that was in his arms. Then they looked as if they had suddenly lost interest. However, feeling two large amounts of bloodlust and killing intent directed at them, they suddenly took Fu from Naruto's arms and started to roll her through the hospital. Naruto tried to follow after them, but when he did, he was stopped by the silver-haired male from Konoha. I'm sorry, Naruto, but we need to take you to the Shibuki's office and talk about a few things, the blonde heard Go say behind him. Go placed his hand on Na and within seconds they disappeared in a puff of smoke. Before Na knew what was going on, he found himself in Shibuki's office with smoke around him. He quickly wiped away and moved away from them. That felt weird, Na said looking at them. Yeah, the first few times feel strange, but you get used to it, Guro said, looking at Na. So, what's so important that I had to leave? Fu Naruto asked looking at the two men in front of him. Yes, I am also a little curious as to what is going on, Shibuki said suddenly making his presence known to them. When they heard this, Kakashi turned towards Go. Care to explain? Kakashi asked looking at him. No thanks. I'm way too sober for this headache, Go said looking at the male in front of him. Hearing this, Kakashi let out a sigh. In all honesty, he was hoping to leave before he had Na asking questions. But at this point, it seemed like it was unavoidable. Well, 6 years ago, we had a boy in our village who was treated horribly. Every day, he lived with the villagers and even some of the ninja trying to attack him. He was usually able to outrun them, but then there were other times that he wasn't. On the few rare occasions that he was caught, they would beat him in ways that might even put some of the members in our torture department to shame. There was actually one time I found the young boy in a pile of barbed wire, Kakashi said looking at the second youngest male in the room. Naruto shivered at the memory. He knew that he was talking about him. How could he not? After all, He had never heard of anyone else being treated as badly as him. And if there was someone else like that, then he was sure that they would have met at one point or another. When he thought about the memory, it made him a bit sad. That particular event actually happened on his birthday, and unknown to several others who probably didn't care. He was actually in that pile of barbed wire for 3 days. I see. Please continue, Shibuki said, taking a mental note of Naruto's facial expression. He already had an idea of who this boy was, but he didn't want to say anything, just hoping that he was wrong about who he thought it was. After all, they were attacked today, so maybe it was possible that it was one of them and not Na. Well, one day he just left the village. Not many people were sad to see him leave. In fact, just a handful of people were actually sad to hear that he had left. To be honest, the ones that weren't sad actually went as far as to celebrate his disappearance. They celebrated for an entire week. Everything was free, and what wasn't free was very cheap, Kakashi said as he let his eye drift over to Na. Shibuki tensed up when he saw this. It only made him think he was more right about who this child was. I see. So, what happened to him? Shibuki asked, looking at the male in front of him. Well, 4 years ago when he was 8, I guess he just had enough of being everyone's punching bag and left the village. Although, in all fairness, I can't say I really blame him. Most of the village celebrated his leave of absence. They gave food and candy away for free. And some of the most expensive things in the village were all being given away. However, for every 100 that were happy, there was one sad for his disappearance, Kakashi said, looking at the two in front of him. Why was he treated so badly? Shibuki asked, looking at Kakashi. He had his own guess at what the reason was. After all, it was a little strange that just one boy in the entire village of Konoha was treated badly. The only person he knew like that in all of Takihime was treated like that was Fu. And the only reason she was treated that way was because she was a genturi. Well, he was treated this way because he was a genturi. Of course, you're both wondering which Buju was sealed inside of him. Am I right? Kakashi asked, looking at Shibuki, earning him a nod. He didn't receive a response from Guo. After all, he had explained everything on the way to the village, so he already knew everything. After a few moments of silence, Kakashi finally worked up the nerve to speak. He usually wouldn't have any problem saying this, but the fact that Naruto was still in the room was making it rather difficult. For him, it was actually the very Buju that had attacked Kanehage 12 years ago. The Beiju sealed inside of him as the Keibi no Kutsun, Kakashi said, looking at the two in front of him. Naruto's eyes widened, although Kakashi couldn't see this because the young blonde was still standing behind him. He knew he was a genturi, but to hear that he had the creature that had attacked Kanehage so many years ago was sealed inside of him was a shock. It's no wonder they all hated me, Naruto thought to himself rather sadly. If it was just a regular Buju, I could have maybe changed their minds about me. But the Keibi no Kutsun, they would have never given me a chance. It would take nothing less than me saving the entire village for me to earn their trust. Naruto thought to himself as he looked down at his stomach. I guess me and Fu have more in common than I originally thought. Naruto thought as he placed his hand on his stomach. I see. So, is this the one? The one who attacked you? Shibuki asked, looking at Kakashi. He was almost certain at this point that it was Na he had been talking about. But still, it never hurt to be hopeful. The main reason why that Shibuki didn't want it to be Na was because he didn't want Naruto to be taken back to that village. He didn't want Naruto to be taken to a place where he was treated like garbage. No, this one is far too old and doesn't even look like the boy that had left the village, Kakashi said, looking at him. I see. So, do you know where he is now? Shibuki asked, looking at Kakashi. He's legally dead. However, I've thought differently for a long time. I believe that he is alive, Kakashi said, looking at Shibuki. I see. Shibuki then sighed. He was already regretting what he was about to ask, but he had to know. He had to be 100% sure that it was Na before he did anything else. So, what was this boy's name? Shibuki asked, looking at Kakashi. His name is Na Uzuaki, Kakashi said, looking at the male in front of him. As soon as he said this, a silence filled the room. So, what do you plan on doing? Shibuki asked, looking at Kakashi. About what? Kakashi asked, looking at the male sitting in the chair. About Na, Shibuki asked again, looking at Kakashi. He tried to hide his sadness the best he could, but some of it still slipped into his voice. I don't want him to leave. Then again, there may be nothing I can do to stop it. I can hold it off perhaps, but as for actually stopping it, I don't think that's possible. I don't want Naruto to leave. He's the only one who's ever treated Fu like an actual person before. And from the way it sounds, she may be the only person who's ever treated him like that as well. Shibuki thought to himself. Na tensed up at this question. After all, if there was one place he didn't want to come back to, it was Konoha. They were happy when they thought he had just left the village anyway. He can only imagine how happy they were when they thought he had died. Not only that, but he can only imagine how upset they'd be to find out that he had not only lived, but was now also returning. Weren't you listening? Kakashi asked, looking at Shibuki. He then leaned forward and talked with a different tone. Naruzumaki is legally dead. This Naruto, which I have been told was an orphan, has no last name, Kakashi said, looking at Shibuki. The younger male internally smiled at this and looked at Go, who returned his smile. He was happy that Naruto got to stay in the village, and he was also a little happy that he told Kakashi that lie a week ago. Because of that simple partial lie, Naruto was able to stay in the village. However, even as happy as Shibuki was that Na was getting to stay in the village, he just had to know something else. What about our Na? He doesn't look similar to your Na in the least. Shibuki asked, looking at him. Sure, your Naruto and our Naruto might have a few similarities, but who wants to think about a kid that they didn't like that died a few years ago? It's kind of a depressing topic and one that I'd rather not bring up, Kakashi said as he got up from his chair. I see. Thank you, Shibuki said, looking at the silver-haired male as he walked out of the building. Sure thing. And even if Naruto was alive, I'd never want to bring him back to a place like Konoha. I'd just ask him a few questions. For example, how he's been and make sure that he's had a good life. I wouldn't want to take something like that away from him, Kakashi said, looking at Shibuki. He then looked over at the blonde that had been quiet and gave him a small wink. This made Na smile because that meant that Kakashi did know who he was, but he wasn't planning to tell the Hokage where he was. Na, there's also something else I'd like to talk to you about, Go said as he placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. When he did, Naruto and Go disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving a confused Shibuki behind. When Na reappeared, he once again found himself in a familiar location. Ah. Stop doing that. It feels weird, Na said, trying to get the tingling feeling to leave his body. Sorry. Now, onto the topic. I believe it's best if we approached this the way I was approached about it. Go said, looking at Na, which is Na asked, looking at the man in front of him, completely confused about what was going on. Go sat down when the blonde asked this and pulled a bottle of sake out from his jacket. Na, we need to approach the fact that you killed someone. Go said, looking at Na. When he said this, Na was a little confused until he remembered that when he had that sudden boost of power, he had killed someone. Na suddenly felt sick to his stomach and fought the urge to vomit. Go saw that he was fighting a losing battle and kicked a small trash can over to him. When Na saw it, he leaned over and vomited a large amount of liquid from his mouth. Don't worry, kid. I had the same reaction, Guro said, looking at him. I killed someone. I killed someone. I killed someone. What's wrong with me? I took from him what no one has the right to take. I took his life. Na thought to himself as he looked into the trash can that he still had his head over. After a few moments of silence passed, Go finally decided to speak up. Now, kid, I'm sure you're thinking that you're a horrible person or something along those lines. And I know this because we all have the same reaction. We all feel guilt the first time we take someone's life. Naruto, look at me, Go said, looking at the male. When he said this, Naruto looked up at the male, his body shaking slightly. It's all right. It's not very often that people refer to the old saying that only the strong survive. But in our world, the world of Shinobi, that is usually how it ends up. The strong win and the weak are left to die. It's not a pretty thing, but I want you to know that this doesn't make you a bad person. You had every right to take his life, Go said, looking at him. Naruto looked at him surprised when he said this. No. You're wrong. No matter who or you don't have the right to take anyone's life away from anyone. He could have had a family for all we know. What are they going to think about this? I know what it's like to grow up without a father, but I don't want to put someone else through that. Na said, looking at Go. Then what of Fu? Go asked, looking at the blonde. Naruto froze when heard this, and he looked like he was going to say something. However, Go beat him to it. If no one has the right to take a life, then why is it that he attacked Fu to kill? Nah, she's important to you, and sometimes you have to protect what's important to you, even if it means doing things that you don't agree with. I should know I didn't and lost a brother because of it. Go said, looking at Na. What do you mean? The blonde asked, looking at Go. That's not important right now. Nah, if you hadn't killed him, he would have gone on to kill you, me, and everyone else there. Now, answer this question for me. Do you think he would have felt bad about it? The answer is no, he wouldn't have. Is his life really worth all of ours? Go asked, looking at him. Naruto froze when he heard this and looked at him. He was silent for several moments before he finally spoke up. No, it's not, Na said, looking down at the ground. Exactly. He's not worth it. I share your opinion on things like this. Killing someone is a bad thing, and it should be avoided if possible. I'm sad to say that in this situation, it wasn't possible, and that he needed to die. Nah, you did the right thing. Never question that. You're still a good person, and if you ever question that, just ask yourself this. Which is worse, killing him or losing Fu? Go said, looking at Na. Na once again froze at this and just remained quiet for a moment. Guo was about to say something until the door opened. When it did, the two looked over and saw a familiar silver-haired male walk into the room. What are you doing here, Kakashi? Go asked, looking at him. I came here to give something to Na. It's kind of private, so if I'm interrupting something, I can come back at a later time. Kakashi said, looking at him. No, I was just about to leave. Go said as he got up. When he did, he looked down at Na. Just remember what I said, Go said as he walked out of the building. When he did, Kakashi walked over to the couch and took a seat. What's wrong, Na? You don't look so well, Kakashi said, looking at him. I just killed someone was all Na could say. What Go had said helped him, but he still wasn't over the fact yet. Kakashi understood what he meant almost immediately. Well, it doesn't make you a bad person. If anything, it actually makes you a hero. Every great shinobi in history has had to kill someone at one point or another. Plus, think of it as like an eye for an eye. You thought he killed Fu, so you were going to make things even and take his life. If nothing else, I want you to try to think of it this way. You weren't yourself when that happened to you. Remember, you were under the influence of the Kyuubi when that happened, Kakashi said, looking at the blonde in front of him. So that's what that was. Na thought to himself as he looked up at the silver-haired male on his couch. So why did you come here? Na asked, looking at him. Well, I actually have something I want to give you, Kakashi said as he pulled up his sleeve to reveal a seal on the upper part of his forearm. He pulled out a small needle and poked himself with it and swiped some of his blood over the seal. When he did, a scroll appeared and he held it out to Na. The blonde took it and looked at it a little confused. What's this? Na asked, looking at Kakashi. Well, Konoha was supposed to give you that on your 18th birthday. They won't be able to do that now. And I made a promise to someone that if I ever ran into you that I'd give it to you. I was hoping that would be a little closer to when you were 18. And not when you were 12, but this might be the only chance that I have to give it to you, Kakashi said, looking at him. When he said this, he stood up and looked at him. I was told it was a private matter, so I'll leave you alone, Kakashi said. Looking at him, the elder male then got up and left the room. Na got up when he left and went into the kitchen. That was the only room with a table after all, and there was no way of knowing for sure just how much was on tea. He scrolled. Naruto opened it and his eyes scanned over what it was when he realized just what it was. He tensed up slightly. It was a note from his parents. He was afraid of what he might see. After all, during his entire life, he had been told that no one ever loved him and that his parents abandoned him because he was a freak of nature. However, his curiosity finally got the better of him, and he began to read what was on the paper. Dear Na, If I'm still alive and something has happened to your mother, then please skip this part. If you're reading this, then something has happened to me and I have most likely died. Your mother and I have both prepared a note for you. At the moment, you haven't been born, and your mother is currently 7 months pregnant with you. I hope that you'd never have to see this, but I guess it can't be helped. Well, first things first, my name is Manado Namikaze. Guess you didn't realize you had a famous dad, huh? Well, I'm sorry that I left sooner than I was supposed to. I really looked forward to seeing the man that you have become. Nah, please know that no matter what anyone says, I do love you and have loved you from the moment that your mother first told me she was pregnant with you. There are so many things I want to say, but more than anything I want to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not being able to be there for you when you needed me. And I'm sorry that I never got to teach you the things that you have every right to know. I'm so sorry for not being able to do things that I always pictured doing with you, like taking you fishing, teaching you how to fight, and what you should do to make others happy. I'm so sorry. I hope you know that it wasn't my choice to leave, and that if I could have changed things so that I'm air with you, I would. I'm not asking for you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to understand my reasoning. I hope you've had a good life with your mother and pray that nothing went wrong when she was giving birth and that she's still there with you. I guess I can't really call myself your father, but just know that no matter what you do in life, I'll always be proud of you. I hope that you have a good life, and just in case, I left a gift for you after your mother's message. Although hopefully you won't have to read that. Love, your father, Manado Namikaze. Dear Na, I hope that you're doing well. To be honest, I don't think I made it past birth. There was a very high chance that I would die. Although, if I did survive that and died later, I once again apologize. I hope you're doing well, and I would have loved to have seen the young man that you grew up to be. With your father's brain and my strength, I would imagine. Although, if you didn't get either of those things, I'd still love you all the same. I want you to know that I looked forward to doing so many things with you. I wanted to be your mother so badly that I've pictured myself doing things for you all the time. I've imagined myself tying your shoes, reading you bedtime stories, and kissing you on the cheek. I'm so sorry that I couldn't do any of those things. And there's one thing I want you to know. No matter what happens or what you hear, I want you to know that I love you with all my heart and that I didn't leave you because I didn't love you. In fact, I probably left because I loved you. I guess it's meaningless to tell you all of this now, but I'd like to give you a few words of advice. Please take care of yourself. Wait until you're of proper age to drink. Please don't take any of Jarius dating advice. And if you find a girl that you love, please tell her how you feel. I'm sure you've grown up to become a great man and a fine example of what everyone should strive to be. I know it means nothing now, but please just know that Manado and I have always loved you. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there for you when you needed me, but just know that I would change things if I could have them any other way. I know I must have said this more than enough times already, but I love you, Na. Please take care of yourself and try to do right by others. Love, your mother, Kusha Azuaki. Na felt his body shake when he read this. He felt tears build up in his eyes after reading this. When he was in Konoha, he had been told that his parents had abandoned him because they didn't love him. However, after this, he knew that it was all a lie and that they did love him. His tears were both a mixture of sadness and happiness as they fell down his eyes. He smiled as he read the note over again. He just couldn't believe that they really did love him and they really hadn't abandoned him. They had just died because of something that was beyond their control. He was about to read lower and see what his dad had left him. But he decided not to after reading a certain part of his mother's message to him. If you find a girl that you love, please tell her how you feel. As soon as he read that part, he rolled up the scroll and left the house. When he did, he immediately started to head towards the hospital. When he got there, he sighed and walked into the building. As he entered, he walked up to the girl at the front desk. When he did, she looked at him in disgust. She knew who he was. It was hard not to, who didn't know who the demon lover was. Na was about to ask her what room she was in, but before he could, she answered for him, wanting him to leave as fast as possible. Room 345 on the 4th floor, she said, looking at him. Na nodded his thanks and started to walk up the steps. When he did, Na started to walk faster up the stairs. There were fewer people that way. Plus, with his training as a shinobi, it wasn't really too difficult. When he reached the 4th floor, he started down the halls and looked for Fu's room on the far end of the hall. He found it and walked in to find that Fu was already awake. She smiled when she saw him, and Na returned her smile. Na sat down in the chair beside her and looked at her. I'm glad that you're okay, Fu said, looking at Na. The blonde smiled when he heard this and looked at her. I'm glad you're okay, too, Na said, looking at her. Fu smiled hearing this. However, she then heard something that she knew she would hear. So, what did they say? Are you okay? Na asked, looking at her. Yeah, they said I lost a lot of blood. They could have given me a blood transplant, but they didn't want to waste blood on a demon like me. So, they're just going to wait for my blood to naturally replenish, Fu said, looking at Na. Okay, so how long is that going to take? Na asked, looking at Fu. They said, for a regular human, it could take months or even years for their blood to get back up to a stable level, but seeing as how I'm special, it'll be a few days for me, Fu said, looking at Na. The blonde smiled at this and leaned over, kissing Fu on the cheek. When he did, he pulled away as red as Fu was. What was that for? Fu asked a bit, flustered at his sudden action. I'm just really happy to see you, Naruto said, looking at her. When he said this, he sat down in the chair beside Fu and placed his hand on top of hers. Fu wasn't as flustered by this action as she was the other. After all, they held hands all the time. They had even held hands when they were on the mission that they had just come from, so this wasn't really a surprise to her. Na said, gaining the green-haired female's attention. Fu looked at the blonde who turned as red as a certain Haug female would. She was going to ask what was wrong with him, but before she could, he said something that forced her to become the same shade of red. I love you too. Fu looked at him and the two found themselves moving towards each other. Their lips then met each other in a sweet and passionate kiss. The two didn't really know what they were doing, but seeing as how it was their first kiss, it didn't really matter because to each of them, it was the best thing in the world. When the two of them pulled away, Fu smiled, and even though it hurt her just a bit, she reached over and hugged the blonde in front of her. Na tensed up for a second before he smiled and wrapped his arms around her. The two stayed like that for the longest time, just holding each other. It was a nice feeling for the two of them. It put the two of them at ease and made them relax. When the two finally did separate, they continued to hold hands, neither one of them saying anything. They just stayed there enjoying each other's company. It had been almost 5 days since Fu had gotten better. She, like the doctors had predicted, got better almost exactly around the time that they had guessed she would. At the moment, Na was watching a doctor doing a final checkup on Fu. He avoided making physical contact with her. Instead, just asking her several questions. Na stopped paying attention halfway through, but was still paying a little bit of attention. All right, seems like you're clear to leave the hospital, the doctor said, looking at Fu. When he said this, he left the room, and Naruto looked at Fu while smiling. When the doctor had left the room, Fu got up from the bed and stretched. It feels nice knowing that I'll get to go home and not have to stay here. There are far too many people here for my liking, Fu said, looking at the blonde beside her. Na smiled hearing this and looked at her. Yeah, it'll be nice to get back to training with Guo. Na said, looking at her. Fu nodded hearing this and opened up the window. Na knew why she did this. She planned to leave through the window. Na couldn't really blame her for this. If she had left through the front door, she'd be faced with several people staring at her. She jumped out the window and landed on the building beside the hospital. Na smiled seeing this and he too jumped out of the room. He landed beside Fu and the two started to jump from building to building. When the two got home, they saw two unexpected males inside the house. Kakashi and Sai were waiting for them. What are you two doing here? Fu asked, looking at them. When the two males heard her, they turned to face them and one of them smiled. Fu, it's good to see that you're well, the elderly male said, looking at her. Fu wasn't expecting this. She wasn't used to anyone besides Na being nice to her. Thanks. Now, back to my question. What are you two doing here? Fu asked, looking at them. Well, we need to talk to Na. Both of us have something we want to discuss with him, Kakashi said, looking at the two in front of him. Oh. Okay then, Fu said, looking at them. I'll go first. Fu, you actually need to be here for this, Kakashi said, looking at her. Okay, Fu said, looking at him. When she said this, Fu sat down on the seat across from them and Naruto sat beside her. Well, Fu, I don't blame Naruto for not telling you sooner. Chances are he didn't know until today. However, I believe that you have the right to know. I also ask that you don't think any differently of him because of it, Kakashi said, looking at her. He didn't know why he asked the last part of his sentence to her, but he thought it was the right thing to say. Why? Okay, then what is it? Fu asked, looking at them. Na, like yourself, is a Jinchuriki. You probably don't remember because you were unconscious at the time. However, he used his tailed beast's power when he was fighting with our attackers, Kakashi said, looking at her. Fu was surprised to hear this and looked at Na. She now understood why he had left the village he was born in. Fu turned her head to look at Na and saw that he was looking a little bit nervous. When she saw this, she placed her hands on Naruto's, causing the blonde to look at her. Na's all right, Fu said, looking at the male. When she said this, Na smiled and looked at the two males that were in front of him. So, what was it you wanted to talk about, Sai? Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. I would actually like to speak with you in private, Naruto, Sai said, looking at him. Na didn't know why, but he didn't like the way Sai was talking to him. He may be smiling, but something about his smile seemed off to him. Okay then, Na said as he got up from his seat and followed Sai. The two went into the kitchen and Na looked at him. So, what is it you wanted, Sai? Na asked, looking at him. When Naruto asked this, Sai pulled out a small piece of paper and handed it to him. This year the Chunin exams will be held in Kanahagaka. I would very much like to see you there. You are an interesting character that shows a lot of promise. I want to see you there so that the both of us can move up in the ranks, Sai said, looking at Na. Na once again having a problem with the way Sai was talking. However, despite his natural instinct, he took the piece of paper from Sai. I'm not sure if the three of us are ready yet, but I'll consider the idea, Naruto said, looking at Sai. When Na said this, Sai once again smiled, causing Naruto to have an uneasy feeling. Sai then turned and left the room. When he did, Naruto followed behind him and looked at the two that were in the room. Na watched as the two left his house. When they did, Naruto turned his attention to Fu and she smiled. So, you're like me? She asked, looking at him. Naruto nodded when she asked this, and Fu walked over to him. Then that just means I have another reason to love you. You're the only one who can have any idea about what I've been through, she said, looking at Na. When Na heard this, he felt his face heat up slightly. He still wasn't used to hearing Fu say things like that to him. He didn't mind it, of course, but it still managed to make him uncomfortable. Na then opened the door and looked at Fu. Want to go and find Shiru and Guo. I'm sure they want to know how you're doing as well, Na said, looking at the female in front of him. Fu nodded when Naruto asked this and the two walked outside. The first place they went was Shiru's house. However, when they knocked on the door, they found that he wasn't home. The two looked at each other in confusion until Fu spoke up. Maybe they've already gone to the training grounds, Fu suggested, looking at Naruto. Yeah, that makes sense. After all, they haven't exactly heard anything from us for some time now. I'd imagine that Go's been training Shiru this entire time, Naruto said, looking at Fu. The two then turned around and started to head towards the training grounds that their team always met at. However, as the two got closer and closer, they started to hear yelling. At first, the two thought that they were hearing things. However, as the two progressed, it became increasingly clear that they were not just hearing things. When they were finally able to see the two of them, they decided to just stay out of the way for now and watch what was unfolding in front of them. Please, just calm down, Shiru, Guo said, looking at the young white-haired male in front of him. Calm down, you disappeared for more than 8 years. I spent almost half of my share of the family fortune looking for you. I was so worried that something had happened to you. Now you're telling me that you knew I was looking for you the entire time. What the hell is wrong with you? The least you could have done was let me know that you were all right. You were one of the only reasons I became a shinobi to begin with. I wanted to find you. Father and mother may not care about you, but I do. Shirou said, looking at the taller male in front of him. Shirou, I understand you're upset with me, but if you don't calm down, then Go began only to get cut off by Shirou. Na and Fu couldn't see what had happened to Shirou because of how far away they were, but Guo could see that Shiris usually BL. Yui's eyes had turned a brilliant golden color. No. I won't calm down. Did you even know how worried I was? Did you even care? Oh. Were you just concerned about stuffing your face full of sake? Shirou shouted, looking at the male in front of him. Go tried to place a hand on Shirou's shoulder, but when he did, Shirou slapped it away. Go didn't let it show, but the slap that Shirou had just given him felt more like a boulder was just smashed into his arm. Shirou then backed up, and when he regained his balance, he slammed his foot on the ground. When Shirou did, Naruto and Fu both felt the ground beneath them shake slightly. For a few moments, everything was silent. Shirou then turned around and started to run in another direction. Na and Fu were both surprised to see how fast Shirou was running, seeing as how he had never run that fast before. Na and Fu then walked up to Go. Is everything all right? Na asked, looking at the elderly man in front of him. No. While Fu was in the hospital, Shirou found out something that I wanted to keep hidden from him for a little bit longer, Guo said, looking at him. What would that be? Fu asked, looking at Guo. When she asked this, the elder man sighed and looked at Fu. It's a long story. I'll tell the two of you later when I have some free time on my hands. For now, I'm going to go look for Shirou, Go said as he started to walk away. When he did, Na and Fu looked at each other. Do you think if we went and found Shirou, he'd tell us what's going on? Na asked, looking at Fu. I'm not sure if he'll tell us what's wrong. But if nothing else, we can go and see if there's anything we can do for him, Fu said, looking at Na. The two then started to walk back into the village, and when they did, they went to Shira's house. When they knocked, they found that Shirou once again wasn't home. I told you he wasn't going to be home, Fu said, looking at the blonde in front of her. I know, but it was worth a shot, Na said, looking at her. The two then started to walk down the streets. So, where do you think he went? Na asked, looking the green-haired girl beside him. I don't know. Maybe he went to the park. He seems to like spending time outside. Apart from that, I always see him at the park when I'm walking around, Fu said, looking at him. All right, then. That's the first place we'll try, Na said, looking at Fu. The two then started to make their way towards the park. When they arrived, they both found that Shirou was at the edge of the dock. The two smiled seeing Shirou. However, Fu was smiling for two reasons. The first was that they had found Shirou. And the second was that this was the place that she had first met Na. To think she would never have met Na if she hadn't seen him here alone with a fox. I wonder what happened to that fox. Fu thought to herself as she looked at Shirou. Hey Shirou, is something wrong? Fu asked, approaching the boy. When Shirou heard this, he turned around and looked at his two teammates in front of him. It's Guo, Shirou said, looking at them. What about him? Fu asked, looking at Shirou. It's everything. He's been lying to me this entire time, Shirou said, looking at her. The two then sat down on either side of Shirou, and Naruto looked at the boy in front of him. Care to start from the beginning? Na asked, looking at him. Well, first I guess I should say that Guo is my uncle. He used to visit me and my father all the time. Then one day he just stopped coming. I didn't receive any letters or even hear mother and father talking about him. He just stopped. Unlike my family, I actually care about him. When I was young, he was my idol. He would tell me about everything he did as a shinobi. And I just thought he was amazing. The only reason I became a shinobi was to be like him. I not only wanted to be like him, but when he went missing, I wanted to find him more than anything, Shirou said, looking at them. Wow, that sounds. Fu began only for a voice to cut her off halfway through. Like half of the story, Go said, approaching them. The three then turned around to look at him. However, when Shirou saw him, His eyes once again turned from a blue color to a golden color. What do you mean? Shirou asked, looking at him. He was still angry, but because he was on a dock and didn't want to accidentally destroy it, he acted calmly. The reason I stopped coming around was because of my brother, Guro said, looking at Shirou. Father, what does he have to do with any of this? Shirou asked, looking at Go. After he heard that you wanted to become a shinobi like me, he completely cut off my access to you, even going as far as to have bodyguards keep me from talking to you. As for all the money you invested in finding me, well, I'm sure you must have been a little curious as to why none of them ever tried talking to any of the other shinobi. You may have been paying them to find me, but your father, my brother, was paying them even more so that they wouldn't look for me. Go said, looking at him. Why would he do that? Shirou asked, looking at Go. When he asked this, his eyes turned back to the usual blue color. Because you inherited something he didn't. This was also the main reason he has resented me for most of my life. Go said, looking at Shirou. Really? What is it? Shirou asked, looking at Guo. When he asked this, Guo knelt down so that Shirou could look at him in the eyes. You inherited our bloodline, Go said as his eyes turned yellow. He, on the other hand, didn't inherit this bloodline. We did. I can't really say why he wanted it so much, but when he found out you had it, he cut off my access to you. Go said, looking at him. I don't understand. Shirou said, looking at the elderly man in front of him. I'll explain more when we get home. Go said, looking at his nephew. Shirou then got up and the other two also got up from the dock. I'll tell the two of you the rest of the story later. Right now we need to go home. It's starting to get late. Go said, looking at the two in front of him. The two in front of him nodded and they all left the park. When they reached the entrance, they each went in different directions. Go and Shirou heading towards Shirou's house and Naruto and Fu heading towards their house. When they arrived home, Naruto looked at Fu. Well, seems like Guru was hiding something from us, Na said, looking at her. Yeah, I can't imagine how Shirou feels. He must be confused, Fu said, looking at Na. Yeah, so what do you want to eat? Na asked, looking at Fu. I don't think we have much left, but let's see what we can make, Fu said, looking at Naruto. At Kanahagaka, Team 7 had just left the Hoage office. 3 of the 4 members of that team then started to head towards their respective homes. Sai, however, went somewhere else. Sai walked through the streets until he reached a random wall of Kanahagaka. When he did, he started to walk alongside the wall until he reached a small house. Sai gave one of his fake smiles and went behind the house. Sai then looked at the back of the house and reached into his pocket. Sai, for whatever reason, found himself a little disappointed with the house. It was barely big enough to even be considered a house. It looked more like an outpost than a house. It was 7 feet tall and almost 5 feet wide. It barely had enough room for someone to live in, let alone entertain themselves. Then again, Sai wasn't going inside the house. He was doing something else. As Sai was searching through his pocket, he let out a slight chuckle. Sai then pulled out a piece of paper with kanji on it. Sai then looked around for a few seconds, making sure that no one was nearby or that they were following him. When he was certain no one was around, he placed the piece of paper on the wall and started to channel chakra to it. When he did, a door outlined in chakra then opened and revealed a set of stairs. Sai's smile grew slightly seeing this and he peeled the piece of paper off the wall. When he did, he walked through the door as it started to slowly close behind him. While he was walking down the stairs, he found that it was starting to get easier to see. He eventually came to a room where he was able to see and saw someone wearing a mask looking at him. Agent Sai, has your objective been complete? The masked person asked, looking at him. Yes, my objective has been completed, Sai said, looking at the man in front of him. Please follow me. Lord Danzo would like to speak with you, the male said, turning around. When he said this, Sai started to follow him, remaining completely quiet until he reached a door. The male then opened the door for Sai and he walked in. When he did, he saw Danzo behind a desk looking at him. Seeing that you're here, I take it your mission was a success? Danzo asked, looking at Sai. Yes, I was able to locate Naruto Uzumaki. Sai reported, looking at him. So, he is in Takagaka. Are you sure that it's the Naruto Uzumaki from Kanahagaka? Danzo asked, looking at him. Yes. He matches the description you gave me. He has spiky blonde sun-kissed hair, sky blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. If that wasn't enough evidence, then I was also fortunate enough to see him use the Kyuubi's chakra, C said, looking at the elderly man in front of him. Well, then that's good to know. How is his social standing? Sai asked, looking at him. From what I've seen, he has 2 friends that care for him as well as a teacher who also cares for him. I have also concluded that he is good friends with the Kage of that village, Sai said, looking at him. Well, then it sounds like abducting him may prove to be a challenge, Danzo said, looking at the younger male in front of him. Not as difficult as you may think. I gave Na an invitation to this year's Chunin exams in hopes that he would attend. If he does, then it will only be his 2 friends and him. This will give us the perfect opportunity to abduct him and use him however you see fit, Sai said, looking at Danzo. Danzo smiled hearing this and looked at Sai. That's good to hear, Sai. You did an excellent job. Now you better go get some rest, Danzo said, looking at him. Sai nodded and left the room. When he was gone, Danzo smiled and began to chuckle to himself. I can't believe my luck. Not only was he able to locate Naruto, but he was also able to convince him to come to the Chunin exams. Who knows? If everything goes according to plan, then I may just get my ultimate weapon after all. Danzo thought to himself. The 3 young members that formed Taki's Team 12 were currently walking down the streets. So what did Sai want to talk to you about? Fu asked, looking at the blonde beside her. Sai, wasn't that the name of one of the guys from Konoha? Shiru asked, looking at Na. Yeah. He wanted to invite me to this year's Chunin exams. Apparently this year it's being held in Konoha and he wanted me to come. Na said, looking at the white-haired male in front of him. Really? Well, that's nice of him, I guess, Fu said, looking at the blonde beside her. Yeah, but to be honest, I'm not sure if we should go or not. What do you think? Na asked, looking at the 2 beside him. Fu looked at Na. She could tell that he was uncomfortable with the idea of returning to Konoha and didn't want him to return unless he wanted to. Fu was about to speak. However, to her surprise, Shiru was the first to speak. I don't think this is the time to be thinking about that. We have training right now, so I think we should wait until after training to decide, Shiru said, looking at the 2 in front of him. I guess Shiru's right. After all, Sensei said he had something important to show us today, Fu said, looking at the 2 males in front of her. Yeah, so we'll talk about this after we get done training, the blonde said with a smile on his face. The 3 then walked to the place where Guo had first tested them. They saw the male standing against a tree with a sake bottle in his hand. However, to their surprise, the bottle hadn't been opened, and by looking at the male, it looked like he hadn't been drinking. When the 3 reached the male, he looked at them inside. Glad to see that the 3 of you are here early like I asked, Guo said. Looking at him, he then placed his hand on the tree and then looked at them. Today I'm going to show you a few chakra control exercises. I planned on showing the 3 of you this yesterday, but as I found out yesterday, it's difficult to control your chakra when you've been drinking, the male said, looking at them. Okay, so what are you going to show us? Na asked, looking at the older male in front of him. When Guo heard this, he smiled and looked to the tree beside him. He then placed his hands together and then separated them. Guru then placed his foot on the tree and to the 3's surprise he started to walk up the tree. How are you doing that? Shiru asked, looking at the older man in front of him. When he asked, this girl walked down the tree and looked at them. It's a simple chakra control exercise. Move chakra to the bottom of your feet and use the chakra to stick to the tree. When you have mastered this exercise, I'll move you up to the next level of this exercise. Then after that, the final level of this exercise, Guru said, looking at the 3 in front of him. Naruto was the first to try. He concentrated some chakra to the soles of his shoes and started to slowly walk up the tree. Na smiled when he was halfway up the tree. However, his smile soon faded when he heard a loud crack and was forced off the tree. Go chuckled slightly seeing this and looked at the male. He was doing good at first, but at the end used too much chakra and was launched off the tree. Go thought looking at Na. Go then turned his attention to his nephew and saw him walking up the tree like Naruto had done. However, unlike Na, he watched as Shiryu, instead of being launched off the tree, instead slipped and fell down again. He had it at first, but in the end let it slip to just under enough to stick to the tree. Go thought as he turned his attention to Fu. He then watched as she walked up the tree and like Na used too much chakra and was pushed off the tree. Seems like she's having the same problem as Na. Well, at least none of them are naturals at this. However, I do have one concern, Guro thought as he once again turned his attention back to his nephew. Shiryu's not a Gingari like Naruto and Fu are. So, his chakra reserves will be drained a lot quicker than theirs will. Hell be drained while they could keep going for possibly hours. Not only that, but he'll have to have good chakra control for our bloodline. If he's not in control when he uses it, then there's a good chance that he could destroy his entire body. Or maybe thought as he looked at the white-haired male in front of him. Go then sighed and looked up at the sky. I forgot how easy it is to relax when I haven't been drinking. Go thought to himself as he slowly closed his eyes. However, he was forced to open his eyes once again when he heard someone calling his name. He opened his eyes to see that both Naruto and Fu were looking at him. Have you mastered the first exercise? Go asked looking at the two in front of him. Yes, sensei, Fu said, looking at the older male in front of her. Then follow me and we'll move on to the next exercise, Guru said, looking at the young couple in front of him. Actually, we were hoping that we could leave early, Na said looking at the male in front of him. What? Go asked a little confused. He then looked at the two with a curious expression, and Naruto started to explain. Well, today I planned on taking Fu out somewhere. I've been wanting to take her out for a while now, and the blonde began only to get cut off by Guo. That is enough. I get the picture. Yes, the two of you can leave. We'll just start on the next exercise tomorrow, the gray-haired male said, looking at the two in front of him. When he did, the two smiled and started to run towards the village. Thanks, sensei, the two said in unison as they continued to run. Go sighed, seeing the two of them, and then looked towards the trees to see that Shiryu was laying on the ground, out of breath and exhausted. It's just like I thought. The two of them didn't seem exhausted in the slightest, but Shiryu seems to have reached his limit, Guru thought, looking at the male. He then watched as the male got up and looked at the tree. But it seems like he's determined to not fall behind them. I don't think he'll notice if I disappear for a little bit. Guru thought as he sunshined away. Shiryu however panted and looked at the tree. He then slowly got to his knees and looked at the tree and then without warning ran towards the TR. He attempted to run up the tree. However, his chakra was so low that his feet didn't even stick to the truck. Shiryu fell down and slowly sat up. He looked at the tree and then sighed. I have to get this before the day is over. Shiryu thought to himself as he ran towards the tree. However, unknown to him, his chakra was very low. So low, in fact, that when he tried to run up the tree, he didn't have enough chakra to stick to the tree. The male then fell down and slowly sat up. He looked at the tree and sighed. Just one more try, Shiryu said as he tried to force himself onto his feet. When he did, the male's chakra once again started to deplete itself. Eventually, the white-haired male's chakra became so low that his body stopped moving. Shiryu looked at his hand and tried to move, but nothing happened. Shiryu then relaxed and smiled. Maybe I should relax just a bit, Shiryu thought as he closed his eyes. With Na and Fu, the two were walking down the streets of Taki with their hands locked together. Fu then looked at Na with a curious expression on her face. So, where are we going? Fu asked, looking at Na. I'm taking you to the place that we first met, Naruto said with a smile on his face. When he said this, Fu smiled and the two began to walk towards the Takaka Park. When they got there, they started to walk towards the lake. They then started to walk alongside the lake until they reached the dock where they had first met. The two then walked to the edge of the dock and Na looked at Fu. So Na, why did you bring me here? Fu asked, looking at the blonde in front of her. Well, Naruto began looking at her. I originally wanted to take you to a restaurant where we could get something nice to eat, but no one would serve us. So, I started to think about different things that we could do together. However, no matter what came to mind, for one reason or another, I couldn't do it. Then, a thought came to mind, And that led me here with you, the blonde said, looking at her. What thought was that? Fu asked, looking at the blonde male in front of her. When Fu asked this, Na took both of her hands in his and looked at the female in front of him. Naruto's face then turned a little red and he looked at her. How important you are to me, Na said, looking at her. When he said this, Fu's face turned as red as his, and Na began to look at the ground. I don't think about it that often, but Fu, you're really important to me. Believe it or not, I have loved you for a long time. I didn't realize it back then, but now I know that even back then when we were young kids that I was in love with you, Naruto said as he raised his head to look at her. I've loved you for a long time. I'm truly glad that I met you because if I had done one thing different that day, I never would have met you. You were the first person that treated me like I was a normal person. You were the first person to ever show me so much kindness in such a short amount of time. You when no one else would choose to treat me like I was a normal person. Even when you knew I was going to cause problems for you, you stayed with me anyway, Naruto said, looking at her. Na then started to look at the ground, trying to hide his embarrassed face. There have been a few times when I try to picture what my life would be like without you, and you'll never g. You is what comes to mind when I do, Naruto said, looking at Fu. It was quiet for a few seconds before Na started to speak again. Fu, every time I try to think about what my life would be like without you, nothing ever comes to mind, Naruto said as he once again looked up at Fu. When he did, he saw that a few tears were building up in her eyes. When he saw this, he reached up and began to gently wipe them away. Fu, I know I won't be able to do the most amazing things for you, and I know I won't be able to give you the greatest life, but I love you. I have loved you for a long time and I want you to know that no matter what happens, my heart will always belong to you. Na said looking at Fu. When he said this, Fu smiled and hugged him. Na was taken back a bit, but smiled and wrapped his arms around Fu. I love you too, Na, and I feel the exact same way about you, Fu said quietly into his ear. Na smiled hearing this and pulled her a little closer to him. Fu then pulled away slightly and looked at Na before connecting their lips together. Na slowly closed his eyes and the two were connected for a while before they separated. Na then sat at the edge of the dock with his legs hanging off the dock slightly. Fu then smiled and sat in front of Na. When she did, Na smiled and wrapped his arms around her waist and let her lean against him. Na then placed his head on her shoulder and the two looked at the lake just enjoying each other's company. When dusk was just beginning to set in, Fu sighed and stood up. She then looked at the blonde that was still sitting down and offered him a hand. We promised Shiru that we'd meet him at his house, remember? Fu said, looking at Na. The blonde, like his counterpart, sighed hearing this and accepted her hand standing up. Well, let's hurry up. Wouldn't want to keep him waiting, Naruto said looking at Fu. The green-haired female nodded slightly hearing this, and the two started to walk towards the house that they had learned Shiru lived in. When they got there, Naruto knocked on the door a few times, and the door opened. Shiru looked at them inside. Please come in. I'd like to talk to the two of you about something, Shiru said, looking at them. When he said this, the two walked into the house. When they did, the two took a seat next to each other, and Shiru sat down and looked at them. So, what do you want to talk about, Shiru? Na asked, looking at the white-haired male in front of him. It's about what you said this morning about whether or not we should go to the Chunin exams, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, Naruto almost immediately tensed up and looked at him. Fu could tell how nervous Naruto was and looked at Shiru. She saw that he was looking down and that she couldn't see how uncomfortable Naruto was. So, what do you think? Na asked, looking at the white-haired male in front of him. Fu was a little surprised to hear Naruto ask this since she knew how much he didn't want to return to Konoha. We can't go there. Shinobi from Konoha have come here to try and kidnap him before. If we go there, it just make him a huge target. I have to talk Shiru out of going, Fu thought as she looked at the blonde beside her. Fu then turned her attention to Shiru. Shiru, please listen about the Chunin exams. I honestly think that Fu began only to get cut off by Shiru. I don't think we should go, Shiru said, looking at the two. Both Fu and Na were relieved to hear this. However, The green-haired female was curious as to why he didn't want to go. Mind if I ask why? Fu asked, looking at the white-haired male beside her. It's from what I heard Naruto say. Something just seems off. According to Na, Sai said he wanted to see Na there. He said he'd be happy if Na went to Konoha. Why would he just want Na there? Something about that just seems off to me, Shiru said, looking at the two. The blonde he was with hadn't thought about it until now, but he realized that Shiru was right. The way Sai worded what he said made him realize that he didn't want to the rest of the team there. Sai didn't care if they went to Konoha or not. He just wanted him there. Shiru then once again spoke, bringing Naruto out of his thoughts. I think it's obvious that I'd just be a liability to the two of you. From what I've seen, the two of you are at the moment far above my level, so I'd rather have more time before trying to pass the Chunin X. Shiru said looking at the two beside him. You're not a liability to us. You're our friend, Naruto said, looking at Shiru. Shiru, if we went, you wouldn't weigh us down. After all, you're part of the team, too. And we'd never leave you behind. Right, Fu? Na asked, looking at the green-haired female beside him. Yashiro, you shouldn't put yourself down like that, Fu said, looking at the white-haired male in front of her. I'm not trying to put myself down. It's just facts. Think about it. Both of you were able to move on to the second stage of the chakra control exercise before the day was over, and I'm still stuck on the first stage. Then a few weeks ago, when we were sent to protect the hero's water, Fu was strong enough to go head-to-head with a Jonin-level nuke nin that had drunk the hero's water, and Naruto was strong enough to beat him, Shiru said looking at them. The two became quiet hearing this and looked at the male in front of them. Shiru then sighed and looked at the two of them. Like I said, I'm not trying to put myself down. But at the moment, if we went to the Chunin exams, I'd just slow the two of you down. So, I just want another year to train us all. By then, I should have my bloodline under control, and I might be at your level. Until then, I'd just like some more time to catch up to the two of you, Shiru said, looking at the two of them. The two were quiet until Na smiled hearing this and looked at him. If that's what you want, then I don't have a problem with it. You can take as long as you need, and then when you think you're ready, well, take the Chunin exams and all pass together, Naruto said, looking at the male in front of him. Yeah. No way are we letting anyone break up Taki's Team 12. Fu agreed with a smile on her face. When Shiru heard this, he smiled and looked at them. Thanks, guys. It really means a lot to me, Shiru said looking at them. When he said this, Naruto and Fu stood up with a smile. Well, not to be rude, but we better get going. It's getting pretty late, Na said, looking at Shiru. Yeah. See you tomorrow, Shiru, Fu said as the two walked out of the house and started to walk down the street. Sher looked at them for a moment and then smiled. For the two of you, I have to get stronger. I promise that Team 12 will not break up anytime soon, Shiru thought to himself as he shut his door. Naruto was walking down the streets of Taki. However, as he was walking, he noticed that the streets were less crowded than usual. Well, at least in terms of the shinobi that were walking through the streets. There weren't as many as he'd usually expect to see. The blonde saw a familiar figure in front of him and walked up to him. Hey, Guro, where is everyone? Na asked, looking at the elderly male in front of him. I'm not sure. I think Shiru's out looking for something in the stores, and I think Fu's training, Guro said looking at the blonde male in front of him. No, I don't mean them. I mean the other shinobi of Taki. There's usually more around here than there are today. Na said looking at Go. Oh. I think they were sent to Konoha. Go said looking at Naruto. The blonde was more than a little shocked to hear this and looked at the elderly male in front of him. Konoha, why? Naruto asked, looking at Go. Apparently, something went wrong during the Chunin exams, and most of the village was destroyed. They offered to pay Taki if we sent some shinobi to help with the cleanup. I'm pretty sure that the reason we were sent is because, well, it's Konoha. And well, you know, Guru said, looking at the male in front of him. Na nodded hearing this and once again began to walk down the streets. Oh. But before I go, do you know which store Shiru is at? Na asked looking at Go. He's at a bookstore, although I'm not sure which one. You should probably try all of them just in case. Go said, looking at Na. When the blonde heard this, he nodded and began to walk down the streets. Na then walked to what he thought was the closest bookstore and walked inside. When he did, he noticed that the female behind the counter gave him a dirty look. Yeah. I'm not too thrilled about being here either. Tell me, did a young boy with white hair and blue come in today? Na asked, looking at the female in front of him. Yeah. He came in and said he was looking for some book. I told him we didn't have it and he left. The female said, looking at Na. When she said this, Na nodded and walked out of the building. Na then once again began to walk down the streets onto the next bookstore but stopped seeing the male that he was looking for. Hey Sharu, Na called out to the male. When he said this, the male turned and looked at the blondumaki. Oh. Hey Na, what's up? Sharu asked, looking at the male in front of him. Na was about to speak. However, stopped himself when he saw the small book that Sharu was holding. What's that? Naruto asked, looking at the male in front of him. Oh. It's a book with all the known Taki Genka in it. I was hoping that reading it would give me a better idea of how my family's works, Sharu said in response to. Oh, the male in front of him. Oh. That's cool, Na said, looking at Sharu. Yeah. I guess. Anyway, what did you need? Sharu asked, looking at the male in front of him. Oh. Yeah. About that, I was wondering if you could help me with something. Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. I guess it depends on what it is. Sharu said, looking at the male in front of him. When Sharu asked this, Na reached into his pocket and pulled out a scroll. Sharu sighed seeing this and took the scroll from Na, then read it. When Sharu was finished reading the scroll, he closed it and looked at Na. Yeah. I can do that. It shouldn't be too hard. When do you need it done? Sharu asked, looking at Na. Oh. Whenever is fine, Naruto said, looking at the male in front of him. Okay. I'll let you know when the arrangements have been made. Is there anything else you need? Sharu asked, looking at the blonde male in front of him. Can you buy something for me? Na asked, looking at the male. No, Sharu said, looking at the male in front of him. Oh. No, I didn't mean here. Let me explain. I was going to do some training with Fu later and I was going to buy some chakra paper. However, I know that if I go in and ask for it, they're going to charge me a lot more than what it's actually worth. So, I was hoping I could give you the money and that you could buy it for me. Na said, looking at the male in front of him. Sharu sighed again hearing this and looked at the male in front of him. Do you have the Rio? Sharu asked, looking at the male in front of him. Naruto nodded when Sharu asked this and reached into his pocket to pull out the amount of Rio needed. When he did, Sharu began to walk down the street. The two then arrived at the weapons shop and Naruto stayed outside of the building whilst Sharu walked in. It was only a few minutes before Sharu walked out of the building. When he did, he handed him the 2 pieces of paper and Naruto smiled. Thanks, Sharu, Na said, giving the male in front of him a smile. Yeah. Please try not to bother me with something this tedious again, Sharu said as he began to walk down the streets. Thanks, Sharu. I'll be sure to repay the favor someday, Na shouted over to the male. Before Sharu had the chance to say anything, Na began to run down the streets. Repay the favor. Why? They're just pieces of paper. Sharu wondered as he turned and began to walk down the streets. As he walked away, Naruto smiled, continuing to walk down the streets towards the training ground that his team usually went to. When he arrived, he saw the girl that he had come to love training with. Hey, Fu, Na called out as he ran up to the girl. When he did, Fu turned to look at him and smiled. Hey, and Na, did ya bring them? Fu asked, looking at Na. As she asked this, the blonde nodded and pulled out 2 small pieces of paper. Fu smiled seeing this and extended her hand. When she did, Na handed her a piece of paper, and the two sat down. Okay, so if it burns, it's fire. If it gets wet, it's water. Turn it to dust, it's earth. If it tears, it's air, and if it crumbles, it's lightning, Fu said, looking at the blonde in front of her. Na nodded, and the two held up the pieces of paper. I'll go first, Na said, looking at his friend. When he said this, Fu nodded and Naruto looked at his piece of paper before beginning to pour a slight amount of chakra into it. When he did, the piece of paper tore into 2 halves. So, It's wind, Na said, looking at the paper. Fu nodded when he said this and then looked at her piece of paper. Okay, now it's my turn, Fu said as she began to pour chakra into the piece of paper that she had. When she did, the paper became wet and started to drip. So, your affinity is water? Narut asked, looking at the female in front of him. When he asked this, Fu nodded and stood up. It's not a lot at the moment, but it's something to start with, Fu said, looking at the male in front of her. When she said this, the two stood up and looked at each other. We can start working on our elements tomorrow. For now, I think regular sparring should be enough, Fu said, looking at the male in front of her. When she said this, Narut nodded and pulled out a kunai, ready for action. I'm ready whenever you are, Narut said with a smirk. Fu pulled out her own kunai and readied herself. The two then ran towards each other and their kunai met. As the two continued their sparring session, they were unaware that there were two pairs of eyes watching them. Na and Fu had just finished their sparring session. Both were panting and covered in sweat from their exchange. I give the win to you, Na said, looking at Fu. Thanks, Fu said gratefully, looking at the male in front of her. When she said this, Narut smiled and began to walk over to her. Let's go. I'm sure that the others are waiting for us, Fu said, looking at the male in front of her. When she said this, Narut nodded and the two began to leave. When they did, they heard some noise and looked towards the source to see two familiar figures looking at them. Shiru and Guo were staring at the two. Shiru, Go, what are you two doing here? Na asked, looking at the two in front of him. Shibuki asked us to come find you. He wanted to speak to the two of you, Go said, looking at the two in front of him. Na and Fu were both a little curious hearing this but didn't question it and looked at the two in front of them. Okay, well then let's go, Fu said, looking at the two in front of her. When she said this, the others nodded and they began to head towards Shibuki's office. So any idea what he wants to talk to us about? Na asked, looking at Shiru. No, Uncle wouldn't tell me anything about what he wants. So your guess is as good as mine, Shiru said, looking at Na. When he did, the two became a bit more nervous. When they reached Shibuki's office, Go looked at the three inside. You three should go in. I'll wait for you out here, Go said, looking at the three in front of him. When he said this, they entered the room and Go sighed as he took out a small bottle from his jacket and took a drink from it. Wish it could have been different, Guo said as he began to walk away from the office. As he did, the three stood in front of the male leader known as Shibuki. You wanted to see us? Fu asked, looking at the male in front of her. Indeed, Shibuki said, looking at the three in front of him. He was quiet for a moment before he took a breath and looked at two of the three. Naruto Fu, a week ago I received word of an organization known as the Akatsuki. Have you heard of them? Shibuki asked, looking at the three in front of him. Yeah, they're something like a criminal organization, Shiro said, looking at Shibuki. The male nodded hearing this and looked at the three. That's correct. However, we have also recently received word that they are also trying to locate the Buju as well as their Jinchuriki, Shibuki said, looking at them. So, they're looking for us? Narut asked, looking at Shibuki. Maybe not yet, but eventually they will be, which means that it's only a matter of time before they come here and try to abduct the two of you, Shibuki said, looking at the two in front of him. So, what are we going to do? Fu asked, looking at the male in front of her. When she asked this, the male's expression darkened slightly. Shibuki, the female questioned, looking at the male in front of her. Like I said, I obtained this information about a week ago and have been thinking about what to do since. However, the conclusion that I came to wasn't a good one, Shibuki said, looking at the two. The male was trying to stay as stoic as possible, but the three in front of him could hear the sadness in his voice. Naro, Fu, I must ask that you leave the village of Takagakar at once, Shibuki said, trying to avoid eye contact with the figures in front of him. Na and Fu were both quiet hearing this and looked at the male in front of them. You're kidding, right? Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. Shibuki shook his head hearing this and looked up at the two. I wish I was kidding, but we're a small village with a small number of shinobi. We couldn't possibly handle an attack from the Akatsuki. They'd kill almost everyone in the village. I figured with the two of you gone, we wouldn't suffer a loss like that. Plus, The two of you would have a better chance of survival if the Akatsuki didn't know where the two of you were. Shibuki SA. Id. Looking at the two in front of him. Na and Fu were quiet hearing this and looked at the male in shock. Shibuki then turned his attention to Shiru. Now, Shiru, the reason I called you to my office was to ask if you'd like to go with them, Shibuki asked, looking at the male in front of him. Go with them? Shiru asked, looking at the male in front of him. Indeed, you see, most Jonin-level shinobi are not allowed to be without a team. However, seeing as how this is a special case, I may have to make an exception. If you choose to stay here, I will be forced to assign you a new team, and there's no guarantee that Go will remain your team leader, Shibuki said, looking at the male in front of him. Shiru was quiet hearing this, and then Shibuki continued. However, I know that leaving this village probably won't be as difficult for you as for Naruto and Fu, seeing as how you weren't born in this village. I also know that given your last name, you probably already have a few connections that can help the three of you. That as well as a few assets that may prove useful for the three of you, Shibuki said, looking at the male in front of him. Shiru almost immediately understood what the male was saying. During this, he didn't invite him here just to give him the choice if he wanted to go or not. But he wanted Shiru to go with them. He wanted him to help them when they left the village so that they could have a better chance of surviving. Sure, I'll go with them, but is there any chance that the three of us could one day return? Shiru asked, looking at the male in front of him. When he asked this, Shibuki closed his eyes for a moment and began to think to himself. When he opened his eyes, he nodded and looked at the three in front of him. I believe that there is the chance that the three of you could return one day, Shibuki said, looking at the three in front of him. When he said this, Naruto and Fu smiled and looked at their teammate. Thanks, Shiru, Na said, looking at the male. I wouldn't have you then thank me. After all, it's because of me that you two have to leave the village. While it's true that the two of you could return someday, that probably won't be for a while. I want the three of you to return when you're confident that you can defeat the Akatsuki. Remember, these are S-rank shinobi, so you'll have to be strong before you can return, Shibuki said, looking at the three in front of him. Understood. When do we have to leave Taki? Shiru asked, looking at Shibuki. You have 3 days. I'm sorry to say, but that's the best I can do, Shibuki said, looking at the three in front of him. When he said this, the three turned around and began to leave his office. When they did, Shibuki sighed and looked out his window and waited for the figures to leave. I really am sorry about this. I just wish that there was more that I could do. But for what it's worth, I do look forward to the day that you'll return, Shibuki said, more to himself than to anyone else. He watched as the three walked down the street, talking to each other inside, and walked back to his desk. Unknown to him, the three that he had just been watching were talking about when they should leave. Taki, so, when do you think we should leave? Na asked, looking at the two beside him. I say tomorrow morning. It'll give us enough time to get everything we have ready so we can leave, Fu said, looking at the two males in front of her. How about tomorrow night instead of morning? It'll give us time to get everything ready like you said. But it'll also give us enough time to gather a few more supplies that we might need, as well as give me some time to make arrangements to help us with traveling. Do the two of you have anywhere in mind for when we leave? Shiru asked, looking at the two in front of him. Not at the moment. What about you, Fu? Na asked, looking at the female beside him. No, so I guess wherever is fine, Fu said, looking at the male in front of her. Shiru nodded hearing this, and the two continued to walk down the street. As they were walking, Naruto thought of what Shibuki had said in his office. Shiru, you weren't born in Taki, were you? Na questioned, looking at the male. No, I came here looking for Guo. It's kind of a pain that the rest of my family had to tag along, but it's nothing I couldn't deal with, Shiru said, looking at Na. The blonde nodded hearing this and continued to walk down the streets. Hey, Shiru, needless to say, we're going to be relying on you for Rio for a while. So, do you think that you have enough Rio to support us while we're gone? I mean, we could be gone for years before we come back, Fu said, looking at the male in front of her. Yeah, 3 people should be no problem, Shiru said, looking at the female. Shiru, if you don't mind me asking, just how much Rio did your family have? Fu asked, looking at the male. When she asked this, Shiru tensed up. However, a few moments passed and Shiru looked at the female. I knew this day was going to come eventually. Although, to be honest, I'm actually a little surprised you don't know that, Shiru said, looking at the female in front of him. The Etos are pretty well known for being rich. However, most don't take the time to learn that much about us, but we're pretty wealthy. My family actually owns 25% of the world's currency, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, the two stared at him, shocked. Yeah, that's about the reaction I expected, Shiro said, looking at the two in front of him. 25%, Na asked, looking at his friend in front of him. Yeah, it's a lot. I know. So, like I said, supporting just 3 people shouldn't be that hard. Even if we do live better than most, Shiru said, looking at the two. Why, yeah, I see what you mean, Fu said, looking at the male in front of her. The 3 then continued down the streets until Naruto and Fu reached their home. When they did, Shiru looked at them and began to walk away. Na and Fu both waved as they watched Shiru leave. Not that he could see it. However, when the male was out of sight, Fu looked at Naruto inside. I guess we better get ready, Fu said, looking at Na. The blonde nodded when she said this, and the two walked into their house. When they did, the two walked to the room that they at the moment were sharing, and the two began to pack a few items that they thought they would need. So, where do you think we'll go? Fu asked, looking at her blonde friend. I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. As long as I get to stay with you, Naruto said, looking at the green-haired female. It took the blonde a few seconds to realize what he had said, and his face turned a little red. Fu, however, smiled hearing this and kissed the boy on the cheek. That's very nice of you to say, Fu said as she continued to pack what little she owned. Once the two were done, they looked at each other and sighed. Well, I guess the rest is up to Shiru, the blonde male said, looking at Fu. The green-haired girl nodded hearing this, and they began to walk over to their bed. When they did, the two laid down beside each other, and Na wrapped an arm around Fu. Tonight's the last night we'll get to spend in this house, Na said, feeling a little sad, knowing that he'd soon have to leave the house that he had made so many memories in. Yeah, Fu said as she thought about all the times that she had spent with Naruto in this very house. But it's like Shibuki said, we might be able to return one day, Fu said, looking at the male. She didn't really care much about returning to the village, but she had envisioned herself with Naruto several times in this house. So returning to this house was something that she wouldn't mind doing. Yeah, but it's like you said, at the moment, all we can do is trust Shiru's judgment, Naruto said as he closed his eyes and slowly began to drift into darkness. However, unknown to the two, Shiru was still awake and planning everything for when they left tomorrow. With Shiru, the white-haired male was currently staring at a small scroll with several words already written on it. Shiru said aloud as he looked at the paper. Fairbell is somewhat close to here, but it's also pretty small. If someone were to look for us, then they'd probably find us. Then again, they're also supposed to be having some kind of festival soon, so maybe finding us would be a little more difficult than usual, Shiro said aloud and more to himself than to anyone else. The male thought it over for a few seconds before he came to a conclusion and once again began to write on the paper. When he was done, he rolled up the scroll, bit his thumb, and began to perform several hand seals before he placed his hand on the table in front of him. When he did, a rather large crow appeared and looked at the male. Ah, Shiro-sama, it is good to see you again. How may I be of service? The bird asked, looking at the male in front of him. I need you to take this to a man named Yorokobi in the town of Fairbell, Shiru said as he picked up the scroll in front of him. It shall be done, the crow said as he took the scroll from Shiru and began to fly away. Shiru sighed seeing this and walked over to his bed and began to lay down. When he did, he, like the other members of his team, felt himself slowly drift off. Unknown to the white-haired male, there had been someone on his roof listening to what he had said. After he was certain that the crow could no longer see him, the male began to move away from the building and towards his own destination. With Na and Fu, the two had just woken up and looked at each other. Well, I guess we better stop by Shiro's house to see if he's awake yet, Fu said, looking at the blonde in front of her. Sounds like a plan, Na said, looking at Fu. The two then began to grab the bags that they had packed the previous night and walked out the door. When they did, they saw the white-haired boy standing beside the door's entrance. It's about time the two of you got up, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, the two smiled and looked at him. So, what's the plan? Na asked, looking at Shiru. When he asked this, Shiru reached behind him and pulled out two small round pouches shaped like frogs. Naro, I want you to go to all the shinobi tool shops and get anything you think we might need. Fu, I want you to go to some stores and buy as many scrolls as you can, Shiru said, looking at the two figures in front of him. What about you? Na asked, looking at Shiru. I'm going to get some food. Enough to hopefully last us until we get to Fairbell, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, the two nodded and opened the small GMA chans that they were given. When they did, they saw that they were almost completely full of Rio. Naruto's eyes widened slightly, seeing this, and looked at Shiru. Are you sure about this, Shiru? Na asked, looking at the white-haired male in front of him. I mean, with this much money, we could. Na began, only to get cut off by Shiru. Yes, I'm sure. I've taken into account how likely the shop owners are to charge you extra. Even so, that should be more than enough to be sure that we get all the supplies that we need. Now, I say we all meet in front of the gate when we're ready, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, the other two nodded, and the three began to go their separate ways. When they did, the blonde did what he was told and went into the first shinobi tool shop he found and began to look around. When he did, he saw a male behind the counter. As soon as the male spotted Naruto, his expression changed to one of anger and disgust. Naruto tried to ignore this and began to walk around the shop. If it's anything like when I left Konoha, then as soon as we leave Taki, people should stop looking at me and Fu like that, Na thought as he began to pick up a few different items. When he took them to the male, he looked at everything that he bought and looked at Na. That will be 5,000 Rio, the male said, looking at the male. Naruto mentally sighed hearing this and pulled out the Gamma-chan that Shiru had given him. Well, I guess Shiru was right to worry about how much they'd charge us. That was only supposed to be 500 Rio, not 5,000, Na thought as he pulled out the Rio that the male had asked for. When he did, the male took the money and looked at Na. For an extra 500, well, also seal it for you, the male said, looking at Na. When he said this, Naruto thought about his offer for a second before he shook his head. That's not necessary, Na said, looking at the male. When he said this, the male nodded and Na picked up what he had bought and walked out of the store. Na then started to head to the next store that he knew of. He continued to do this a few times, finding something different at each store that the others didn't have. When he was done, he looked at Gamma-chan and noticed that it was almost empty. Naruto sighed seeing this and started to walk towards the entrance of Taki with everything that he had just bought. HT. When he arrived, he saw that Fu and Shiru were already there waiting for him. Shiru then looked at everything that Naruto was carrying and smiled. When he did, Na placed all of it down and looked at the two in front of him. Now what I mean, we can't carry all of this, Na said, looking at the two in front of him. Apart from using some of the scrolls as notes, the main reason I had Fu get them was so that we could use them to seal away our supplies, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. Do you know how to use Fu and Jutsu? Naruto asked, looking at the male in front of him. Not to a major extent, but I know the basics, Shiru said, looking at the male in front of him. When he said this, he unrolled two scrolls and started to make some markings on the paper. As Naruto watched, he found himself oddly captivated by the strange technique. Do you think you could show me sometime? Na asked, looking at Shiru. I don't think I'm the person to be teaching this. I only know the basics, and to be honest, I'm not very good at them. Although, we can use what Ryoi had left over from this, and you can go to the library and buy a book about Fujitsu. Like I said, I'm not very good, so I'm sure you have more than enough time, Shiro said, looking at the blonde. When he said this, Naruto thought about his offer for a moment and nodded. Okay, I'll do that. I'll try to make it quick, Na said, looking at Shiru. When he said this, Shiru nodded, and Na began to run down the streets. You can go with him if you want, Shiru said, looking at Fu. Plus, it'll keep you from seeing how horrible I am at this, Shiru thought to himself as he continued to draw on the paper. When he said this, Fu nodded and followed behind Na. The blonde continued down the streets until he reached the library. When he did, he walked in and began to look around the place. He walked towards the small section of the store that had scrolls. He then smiled as he found 3 scrolls on Fujitsu and picked them up. When he did, he also felt a hand on his shoulder. Na turned to see Fu staring at him and holding a scroll. I also found this one at the entrance. Apparently, no one's used this one for a while, so it's really cheap, Fu said, looking at Na. When she said this, Na smiled and took the scroll from her. Thanks, Fu, Na said, looking at the green-haired girl in front of him. When he said this, Fu nodded, and the two began to walk up front. When they did, they saw a female reading a book. We'd like to buy these, Na said, gaining the female's attention. When she looked up at the male, her expression changed seeing the two of them. Since it's the two of you and it'll get you out of here faster. You can just take them, the female said as she once again started to read the book in front of her. When she said this, Naruto shrugged and walked out the door with the scrolls in hand. The two then began to head back towards the entrance. As they arrived, they saw Shiru standing, ready to leave. Sorry to keep you waiting, Na said, looking at the white-haired male in front of him. I wasn't waiting long. I just finished sealing everything, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. Well, then I guess this is it, Na said as he turned towards the village to take one last look at it. Na then sighed as he turned around. The three then began to walk on the water that lead out of the village. With Jiraiya, the white-haired male was just beginning to awaken from his previous night. As he did, he began to stretch and let out a rather tired yawn. Once the man left the house that he had been staying in, he looked up at the sky and smiled slightly. He was about to walk through the streets, but stopped when he saw one of his scouts across the street eating. Jiraiya's expression became a little more serious seeing this, and he walked over to the male and sat down beside him. I'll have what my friend's having, Jiraiya said, looking at the waiter in front of him. When he said this, the waiter nodded and began to prepare a small meal for the white-haired man. I have some information for you, the agent said, looking at Jiraiya. The white-haired man nodded hearing this and watched as a small plate of dango was placed in front of him. Jiraiya then started to eat the small treats that had been placed in front of him, and the agent beside him continued. Na has left Taki, the male said as he continued to eat. Jiraiya, a bit shocked by the news, started to choke on the dango that he was eating and looked at the male. What do you mean he left? Jiraiya asked, looking at the agent in front of him. I didn't get all of the details, but apparently he and 2 others left the village. I think it has something to do with the Akatsuki, the agent said, looking at Jiraiya. When the elder heard this, he became a little nervous, but tried not to show it. The Akatsuki, I wonder what they'd want with Naruto. Is it possible that they were sent to attack the Akatsuki? No, from what I've heard, the leader of Taki is a kind person. I don't think he'd intentionally send a genin team on a suicide mission, Jiraiya thought to himself as he looked at the agent. How long ago did they leave? Jiraiya asked, turning his attention to the agent beside him. 3 days ago, the man said as he finished eating the small dango. He then placed a few Rio on the counter and stood up. When he did, Jiraiya mimicked his action and the two began to walk down the street. 3 days, huh? Do you know how long they'll be staying there? Jiraiya asked, looking at the male in front of him. No, the agent said, looking at Jiraiya. When he said this, the white-haired male began to once again think to himself. If that's the case, then they may already be gone by the time I get there. There's also no way of telling where they went from there. I'll just have to wait and hope one of my scouts get lucky. Even so, I guess it couldn't hurt if I went there. If Na is there, then I may be able to provide him with some small bits of training, Jiraiya thought as he continued to walk down the streets. Jiraiya then stopped and looked at the man that had been walking beside him. Thank you for this information. Let's meet here again in 6 months' time. In the meantime, I want you to see what information you can gather about the Akatsuki. Jiraiya said looking at the male in front of him. The male nodded when he said this, and the two began to go their separate ways. Farewell isn't that far away, but they left 3 days ago. Without knowing how long they were going to stay, it's possible they've gotten what they needed and left. Even so, I should probably go just to make sure, Jiraiya thought as he began to walk through a small set of woods. The three figures of Taki's former Team 12 were walking down a small path through a forest. The sun was finally starting to set, so the air was starting to become a little cooler, making it easier for the three to continue. As the three walked, Shirou finally thought of something he could say to break the silence. Nah, mind if I ask you a question? Shirou asked, looking at the blonde figure in front of him. Sure, Na said, looking at Shirou a little confused. You're from Kanahagaka, right? Shirou asked, looking at him. Na nodded when he asked this, and Shirou looked at him. If we were to return to Konoha, is there anyone you'd want to see? Shirou asked, looking at Na. When he asked this, the blonde closed his eyes and began to think for a moment. Yeah, there's 3 people I'd want to see. I'd want Iruka, the Sandaime, and Tuki, Naruto said, looking at the two in front of them. Oh. Fu questioned as she turned her attention to Na. Who are they? Fu asked, a little curious. After all, she had never really thought to ask Na this because she knew that he didn't want to return to Konoha. Well, Iruka was sort of like a father to me. In fact, I think he might have been the only shinobi in the entire village besides the Sandaime that cared about me. He'd visit me most of the time to make sure I was okay. And he'd even take me out to Ichirakis on special occasions, Naruto said as he remembered the male with fondness. Well, that was nice of him, Fu said, giving the blonde a smile. Yeah, Naruto said, a little sad. However, he quickly hid his sadness and continued. The Sandaime was something like my grandfather. He was so protective of me, and anytime he was around I was always so at ease, like no matter what happened, that as long as he was around he was going to keep me safe. Na said as he once again found himself thinking of the elderly male. I see, Shirou said as he turned to look at Na. And the last one, Shirou asked, a little interested. Tuki, well, he was the owner of a ramen shop named Ikyaku. He served some of the best ramen I've ever had. Naruto said, looking at the two in front of him. I thought you didn't like ramen. Fu asked, looking at the male in front of him. I don't, Naruto said as he looked at her. But his ramen was different, Naruto said as he looked at the sky and started to think back to the day that he first met Kuki. Flashback. A young Naruto was wandering the streets of Konoha. It might not have been so bad for the young male if it hadn't been for the fact that it was raining. He would stay at his house, but like so many other nights, his home was currently full of a bunch of villagers looking for him. The young blonde held his stomach as it let out a slight grumble. It had been a while since the last time he had eaten, so at the moment, his appetite was greater than usual. He continued down an alleyway until he found a large bin full of trash. Naruto once again felt his stomach grumble slight, and he bit his lip. Since they threw it away, they shouldn't mind, Naruto thought as he began to look through the trash. Unknown to the male, he was making a small amount of noise that attracted the attention of the owner of the building. An elderly male with gray hair yawned as he heard a small amount of noise outside. He mumbled to himself as he got up and picked up a small broom. Damn pests, Tuki thought to himself as he walked downstairs and out of the building. He then walked to the side of the building expecting to find a rat or any other form of pests that Konoha had. However, what he wasn't expecting was to find a young blonde looking through his trash. What are you doing? Tuki asked, looking at the male a little confused. When he asked this, Naruto jumped slightly and looked at him. Sorry, it's just I'm hungry and I didn't think you'd mind, Na said, a little timid seeing the male in front of him. And no, it's fine, Tuki said as he looked at the young figure in front of him. It was at this moment that Tuki started to recognize the young male. He would notice that on some of the days that this particular boy would walk down the streets and would often take quick glances at his shop. There were even a few times that he would start to walk over to the shop a little hesitate before walking away. Tuki would be lying if he said he wasn't a little curious about the male. Not because of the fact he'd often look at his shop, but because he was always alone. Even now, as he looked at the blonde male in the pouring rain, looking through his trash for something to eat, he was alone. How about you come inside and I make you something? It'll be better than anything you'll find in my trash. I promise, Tuki said, offering Naruto a kind smile. Na was a little uneasy at the male's offer. After all, he had received the same offer before, and it had always ended badly for him. However, for some reason, this man didn't seem like the type of person to do that to him. So, Naruto slowly nodded and accepted his offer. When he did, Tuki smiled and looked at him. Good, he said as he turned and began to walk into his restaurant. Na slowly followed the male into the building and sat on one of the several seats that were in the store. Na waited patiently as he watched the male in front of him start to move and do several different things. Na started to tremble slightly, remembering what had happened to him last time. Tuki would look over every so often to make sure that the child was still there. However, every time he did, he noticed something. When he would look, he noticed that the small child would look away and avoid eye contact. Tuki let out a sigh seeing this, and after a few moments had passed, Tuki placed a bowl of ramen in front of the Naruto, and his terrified expression immediately faded and was replaced with a smile as he looked at the bowl of ramen in front of him. Enjoy, Tuki said with a smile as he watched the small child began to eat. As Tuki looked at the small child eat the food placed in front of him, several thoughts passed through his mind. What is a child his age doing all alone at a time like this? Where were his parents? And how could they be so irresponsible? Tuki thought to himself as he looked at the young male. However, deciding he didn't want to cause any trouble, he decided not to ask as he watched the small child in front of him eat the food in front of him. Soon enough, Tuki saw the small child lifted the bowl to his lips and watched as the child began to drink as much of the soup as he could, not leaving a drop behind as if it would be his last meal. When the child was done, he placed the bowl down and grinned so wide that all of the child's white teeth showed. Tuki smiled seeing this and looked at the boy in front of him. Would you like another bowl? Chuki said, looking at Na. When he asked this, the blonde smiled and nodded. Chuki took the young child's bowl when he saw this and once again began to fill it with ramen. Na looked at the male in front of him that was helping him. He had never met anyone besides Aruka that offered to get him a meal. The male then turned and once again placed a bowl in front of him, offering him a kind smile while doing so. Na once again smiled, seeing the food in front of him, and like before began to eat. Tuki smiled as he looked at the male and then outside. He noticed that it was still raining inside. Wait here, Chuki said as he walked upstairs. Na once again felt a little uneasy seeing this, but his worries faded as he looked down at the bowl of ramen in front of him. Naruto continued to eat and like before raised the bowl up to his lips so that he could drink the soup of the ramen. After he did, he heard footsteps and leaned over to see Tuki walking down the stairs with an orange coat. It's still raining out, so I thought this might help keep you dry, Tuki said as he offered Na the coat. Na looked at the coat for a moment before he reached out and took it. I know it's a little too big for you, but I got it a while ago and haven't had any use for it since, Tuki said as he looked at the male in front of him. Naruto felt a few tears start to build up in his eyes seeing this and held the coat close to him. No one had ever been this nice to him. Yet, this male that he assumed would hate him like all the others, offered him a warm meal and was now giving him something to help. Tachi then once again looked outside and saw the rain. Actually, Tuki said as he turned his attention to the male. You can stay here for the night if you want, Tuki said, looking at him. Na once again found himself at a loss for words hearing this and moved forward to hug the male. Tui was a bit shocked by this action and looked down at him. He could hear a few muffled sniffs. Tuki was about to ask what was wrong, but his question was soon answered in the form of a muffled voice. Thank you, no one's ever been this nice to me before, Na said as he continued to hug the male. Chuki smiled hearing this and rubbed Naruto's head. Of course, Chuki said as he looked down at the male with a kind smile. And if you ever find yourself in need of a meal that badly again, then don't hesitate to ask, Chuki said, looking at Na. When he said this, the young blonde wiped the tears from his face and nodded with a smile. Chuki then let out a yawn only then, remembering how late it was, and stood up. Well, I'm going to get some sleep. You should probably do the same, Tuki said as he looked down the male in front of him. Naruto nodded when he said this and walked to the entrance of the restaurant and waited for the rain to clear, using the coat that had been given to him as a cover. Flashback end. Sharu looked at Na with a slight smile and turned to him. It sounds like the reason you ramen so much wasn't because of the ramen, but because you like Tuki, Shiru said, looking at him. I suppose that's true, Na said with a slight smile. A small town soon became visible in the distance, and the three smiled. Seems like we finally made it, Na said with a smile. Being the energetic person he is, Naruto couldn't contain his excitement and ran ahead of the others. Hey, wait for me, Na, Fu said as she started to run after him. Shiru sighed seeing this and decided to just walk to the town. When Na arrived, he looked around and sighed. I probably should have known that nothing would still be open this late, Na said looking around. Fu sighed seeing Naruto's somewhat sad expression and kissed his cheek. Feel better? Fu asked, looking at the blonde in front of her. When she did, Naruto's face turned a slight shade of red and he nodded slightly. Fu chuckled slightly seeing this and looked at him. Good, now come on. The place we're staying at can't be that hard to find, Fu said looking at the blonde male in front of her. When she said this, Naruto nodded and looked around. Maybe we should wait for Shiru, Na said a little sheepishly. After all, he is the one who knows where we're staying, Na said, looking at the female in front of him. Oh, right, Fu said, letting out a slight laugh, forgetting that she had no idea where they were supposed to be staying. The two then looked around and saw the white-haired male walking down the streets. Na once again ran towards him, seeing this, and looked at him. So, where are we staying? Na asked, looking at the male. Shiru was a little nervous seeing how excited Naruto was and moved back slightly. We're staying at a hotel with its own hot ring. So, just look for a building with steam coming from it, Shiru said, looking at Na. When he said this, the blonde nodded and the three began to walk down the street. It didn't take them long to find the building that they were going to be staying at. A building that was larger than most with a tall fenced-off area that had steam coming from a few of the holes in the building. Seems like we're here, Fu said as she looked at the building. Yeah, Naruto said as the three walked into the building. When they did, Shiru walked up to the counter and a male wearing a suit came out. We have 2 rooms reserved under the names Uzumaki and Ido, Shiru said, looking at the male. The male smiled and nodded hearing this and handed him 2 keys. I hope you enjoy your stay, Mr. Ido, the male said as he looked at Shiru. Shiru was a little irritated by the fact he used his last name and not his first name, but he knew that it couldn't be helped. Shiru then turned around and tossed one of the keys towards Na. Before the two had the chance to ask any questions, Shiru began to walk away. Wait, where are you going? Fu asked, looking at him. To the hot ring, Shiru said as he walked down the halls. You two may want to try 'em out as well. After all, it'll be a while before we can relax like this again, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, Na nodded and looked at Fu. He's right, we should relax when we get the chance. So, let's go, Na said with a smile. Fu nodded hearing this, and the two began to walk down the halls. The two separated and went their own ways as they each walked into one side of the hot ring. However, as they did, they saw an elderly male with long spiky hair holding a book and writing something down. That should be enough for now, the male said as he shut his book and began to get dressed. Unknown to the male, the two he was looking for had just walked past him and into the hot water that he neglected to enter. The male then walked out, and Na and Shiru looked at each other. So, why did you only reserve 2 rooms? Na asked, looking at the white-haired male in front of him. I didn't know Fu's last name, otherwise I would have reserved a 3rd one. Not only that, but I didn't think you two would mind sharing a room. After all, you two live together, and I've heard from my uncle that the two of you often share a bed, Shiru said, looking at the blonde in front of him. I see, Na said a little embarrassed as he looked up at the stars. They don't have a roof, Shiru said as he looked up. I don't know why, but I always liked that in a hot spring, Shiru said as he looked up at the stars. When he did, he heard a few giggles and sighed. He then turned his attention to Na and saw that he appeared to be in some form of thought, wanting to break Na out of his slightly dazed state. He looked at the blonde male and smirked. You know, Na, I can hear Fu and a few other girls in the bath next door to us right now, Shiru said, looking at Na. When he said this, Naruto's face turned a little red and he looked at Shiru. Why would you even bring that up? Na asked, looking at Sharu.
Which
Oh,
delicious meal would
my
Sir
apologies. I didn't realize that there were rules about what we could discuss in here. Sharu said a little sarcastically as he looked at
hope
Na.
you enjoy
When
your
he said
meal.
this, Na mumbled under his breath, and Sharu
Do
looked
come
at
back
him.
again.
Na, if you don't mind me asking, why do you love Fu? Sharu asked, looking at him. Why do I? Narat began only to trail on as he thought about the question. Why wouldn't I? She's beautiful, smart, strong, not to mention her smiles are great. Well, the real ones are, not the ones she shows to the civilians, Na said with a smile. She's just perfect, Na said with a smile. A few moments passed as the two just stared at each other. Well, this is a little awkward, Sharu said, looking at Na. When he said this, Naruto looked at him a little interested and Sharu explained. Now, whenever I hear you say those sweet words, I won't be able to help but picture you as well, Sharu said, looking at the blonde in front of him. You're a perv, Na said, looking at the male in front of him and sinking into the water a little more. A perv? Ha, Sharu questioned to himself. In that case, Sharu said as he looked at Na. Shall we find a spot where we can peek in on the ladies? Sharu said much louder than usual, causing Naro to once again turn red. Stop it, Na said a little irritated while his face was still red. Sharu chuckled hearing this and sunk back down into the water slightly. Calm down, Na. I was only joking, Sharu said, looking at the blonde male in front of him. The two stayed in the spring for a few minutes before Sharu let out a sigh and stood up. I'm going to look around the town, Sharu said as he got out of the spring. Okay. How are we on supplies? Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. I haven't checked. We can just go out tomorrow and get whatever we need, Sharu said as he began to put his clothes back on. Once he was dressed, Sharu walked out of the building and started to walk down the streets. He passed by a few places that he noticed were still open. Who are you? Sharu heard a new voice say, and when he turned, he saw a male with a dagger looking at him. Sharu examined the male quickly and saw from his stance and physique that he wasn't a threat. Relax, I was just passing through, and the last thing I'm looking for is a fight, Sharu said calmly as he looked at the elderly male in front of him. Well, you found one anyway, the white-haired male said as he lunged forward with the dagger. Sharu easily avoided the male's attack and kicked him into the side of a building. When he did, the male fell back and began to hold his face. So, you're bad at listening and fighting, Sharu said, looking at the male. He then sighed and began to walk away. Then again, he is just a civilian and not a shinobi like myself. If he was a shinobi, then he might have actually been a little dangerous, Sharu thought as he began to walk away. However, unknown to him, a male with long white spiky hair had just seen what had happened. He may be a part of Naruto's team. I was told that he'd be accompanied by two others. Then again, there's always the possibility that he was sent by someone else, Jiraiya said as he stood up and left a few IO on the table. He then began to follow Sharu down the streets. Either way, I'm certain he'll lead me to Na, Jiraiya thought as he looked at the male. Sharu walked back into the building he was staying in after a few minutes had passed and saw that Narat and Fu were just about to enter their room. He paid no mind seeing this and walked into his room. So, how was your time in the hot ring? Na asked, looking at the female. It was nice. A little odd since all the females weren't glaring at me, but it was still nice, Fu said, looking at the blonde male. Yeah. I know what you mean, Na said as he opened the door to their room. Na knew exactly what she meant by them not glaring. He had the same reaction the first few days that he came to Taki. Of course, their smiles of kindness were replaced a few days later when he started to live with Fu. Now that no one's glaring at him again, he's having the same odd feeling as when he first came to Taki. Na then felt Fu hug him and smiled slightly when she did. Either way, it doesn't matter as long as I'm with you, Fu said, still wrapping her arms around Na. Yeah, Na said as he returned her hug and looked at her. He then leaned forward and the two shared a kiss. When they separated, the two smiled and looked at each other. Guess we should get some sleep, Na said, his face a slight shade of red. When he said this, Fu nodded and the two walked over to the bed and began to lay beside each other. Na wrapped one arm around Fu and brought her a little closer, and Fu in turn smiled and nuzzled into his chest slightly. The two then smiled as they slowly began to drift off to sleep. Naruto woke up with a slight yawn as he tried to rise from the bed he was sleeping on and get a look at the room he was in. However, as he did so, he noticed a slight pressure on his stomach. When Naruto looked down, he saw Fu with an arm around him. Na smiled seeing this and slowly moved so that he didn't wake her. The blonde then began to look around the room and soon noticed a small bag at the entrance to their room. Naruto walked over to the bag and opened it to see 2 cups of instinct ramen and a small note with the word enjoy written on it. Na smiled seeing this, knowing that Shiru had gotten it for him and Fu, and walked to another part of their room with a makeshift kitchen. Na then opened the cups and began to make the small cups of food, hoping to surprise Fu. However, as he was making the cups, he heard some footsteps behind him and then felt a small pressure on his back. Morning, Fu said with a smile as she hugged the blonde from behind. Naruto chuckled slightly hearing this and turned holding the 2 small cups, offering one to her. Shiru left as something, Naruto said looking at the green-haired female in front of him. Fu took the cup from him hearing this and smiled slightly. So where are we going after this? Fu asked as she began to eat the small cup in front of her. I was hoping Shiru would have something planned, Naruto said looking at Fu. You seem to really trust Shiru's judgment, Fu said, looking at him. When she said this, Naruto looked at her a little confused before panicking slightly and clarifying what she meant. Not that it's a bad thing. You just seem to trust him on these matters, Fu said, looking at Naruto after she said this. Na finished slurping up some ramen and looked at her. Of course, I trust his judgment. He seems to be pretty smart. You've had to have noticed it, too, Na said, looking at the female. When he said this, Fu gained a somewhat confused expression and looked at him. He's not very good at fighting. His Keki Genki helps him, but those powerful hits don't help if he can't hit his opponent. I think he tries to make up for his lack of power with strategic prowess, Naruto said, looking at Fu. Fu was a little shocked to hear this and thought back to all the time they had spent in Taki together. She had never thought about it before, but Naruto was right. During their training, he had never once managed to land a hit on either of them. Na then stood up and looked at Fu. Guess we should go see what Shiru wants to do, Naruto said, looking at the female in front of him. She nodded hearing this and stood following behind Naruto as she did. When they walked out, they noticed another note on Shiru's door. Fu walked over to the door and read the note aloud. I'm going to be gone most of the day, so don't bother looking for me. Maybe you could explore the town or something, Fu said as she read the note aloud. Well, there goes our plan for leaving today, Fu said looking at the note. Na sighed hearing this, nodded to himself and turned to look at the female in front of him. I guess we'll explore the town, Na said. Fu smiled hearing this, and the two began to walk down the streets. As they did, the two noticed that there wasn't much that the small town had to offer. The two continued down the streets for a while until Na looked at the female beside him and with a slightly red face decided to grab her hand. When he did, Fu looked at him, causing Naruto to look away from her, his face a slight shade of red. Fu smiled seeing this and intertwined her fingers with his, and the two continued to walk down the streets. As they were walking, they heard some constant footsteps behind them, and Naruto looked at Fu and she nodded, signaling that she also heard whoever was following them. The two then smiled and ran down an alleyway, a bit excited to lure whoever was following them into the alley. As soon as they got a little ways in the alley, the two quickly jumped onto one of the nearby buildings and waited for the figure to walk down the alleyway. However, their follower never did. It seemed like they had just disappeared. What did you really think I was going to follow you into such an obvious trap? The two heard a new voice say behind them. Naruto and Fu, both acting on instinct, turned and threw a kunai at whoever was standing behind them. When they did, they saw a male with long spiky white hair. The male raised both his hands, sliding a finger into the hole of each kunai and looked at them. Your reflexes are a bit slow, but I'm sure we can fix that before the time is over, the male said while looking at the two in front of him. As soon as he said this, they both took a defensive stance and the male held up his hands with the kunai hanging from his fingers. Relax, kids. I don't want to fight. In fact, I actually want to help, the male said as he dropped the kunai, showing that he indeed didn't want to fight them. My name's Jiraiya, and the truth is, I actually want to train you. Or more specifically, I want to train Na, Jiraiya said as he looked at the two in front of him Train me. What could you possibly teach me? Na asked, looking at the male he now knew as Jiraiya. The elderly male smiled hearing this and held up one of his hands. When he did, a blue spiraling orb began to gather in his hand. I think this would be a good place to start, Jiraiya said, letting the blue ball disperse. Why would you want to do that? Fu asked, looking at the male in front of them, still skeptical of his offer. Let's just say I owe it to two old friends, Jiraiya said, looking at the two in front of him. They eased up a bit hearing this, but still kept the defensive stances just in case. What about Fu? Na asked, gesturing to the female beside him. I'm aware of your little girlfriend. And if you want, then she can come too, Jiraiya said, looking at the two in front of him. What about my other friend? He's not here, but he's important too. Can he come as well? Na asked, looking at Jiraiya. He didn't care who this male was. If his friend couldn't come as well, then he didn't want to train with him. When he asked this, the male seemed slightly surprised before letting out a sigh. I wasn't aware you had someone else with him. But if you insist, then he can come as well, Jiraiya said, looking at the two in front of him. However, Jiraiya said, looking at the two in front of him, gaining their attention. I'm a somewhat busy man as well as impatient, so I'll need an answer before 5 or I'll assume you're declining my offer. I'll be at the Lusty's bar if you decide to accept my offer, the male said as he jumped off the roof and began to walk away. When he did, Fu looked at Naro. What do you think? She asked, looking at him. I'm not sure. I think we should ask Sharu. Na said, looking at Fu. She nodded hearing this and the two began to walk down the town. So, how are we going to find him? His note said he'd be gone most of the day, Fu said, looking at Na. After a few moments of silence, Na remembered something Sharu had said the day before they arrived and looked at Fu. I bet he's at the park. Remember, he said he wanted to see the fish they have here. Na said, looking at the female beside him. Fu nodded hearing this, and the two walked down the streets towards the small park that the town had. When they arrived, they saw Sharu near a small lake bent down looking in the water with a smile on his face. Wow, they really a rainbow koi, Sharu said, slightly amazed as he looked at the fish in front of him. As he did, the two walked up to him with small smiles, seeing him enjoying what he was doing. However, their smiles quickly faded when they finally reached the male. Sharu then turned around to see the two looking at him inside. What do you two want? Didn't you see the note I left? Sharu asked as he continued to feed the fish in front of him. Yeah, but this is kind of important, Na said, looking at the male in front of him. Sharu sighed again at hearing this and stood up to look at the two. All right, what is it? Sharu asked, looking at the two in front of him. Actually, it'd probably be better if we went somewhere else to discuss this, Fu said, looking at Sharu. The white-haired male was a little confused to hear this, but nodded nonetheless and followed the two as they began to walk down the streets, eventually returning to the building that they had left just minutes ago. Na and Fu then walked into their room, and Sharu followed behind them, being sure to shut the door as he did. Fu and Na then sat down and looked at the white-haired male in front of them. When they did, Sharu sighed and looked at them. All right, so, what's so important that you had to find me and drag me away from the koi to talk about? Sharu asked, a little irritated by the two in front of him. Well, we met someone earlier today. Someone named Jiraiya, Naruto said, looking at the male in front of him. When he said this, the male seemed shocked to hear his name and Fu noticed his reaction. You know him? Fu asked, looking at him, and Sharu nodded. To some extent, I don't know him, but I know of him, Sharu said, looking at the female. Well, he came up to us today and offered to train us. I'm not sure what we should do since the Akatsuki are still after us. He could just be one of them in disguise or possibly working with them, Naruto said, looking at Sharu. If he's the real Jiraiya, then I highly doubt that he's working with the Akatsuki. But you are right to be cautious. Not to mention that if this is some kind of bluff, it's an all or nothing bluff. A criminal organization wouldn't be stupid enough to hinge everything on something as risky as this, so I don't think he's with them either, Sharu said, looking at the blonde in front of him. Sharu then closed his eyes and began to think out every possible scenario that he could. After several minutes had passed, Sharu once again opened his eyes, and Na looked at him. So Sharu, what do you think we should do? Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. Sharu sighed hearing this and looked at the male in front of him. I think you two should go with him. Sharu said looking at the two in front of him. Na smiled hearing this and stood up a little excited. Great, then let's go to Lusty's. Na began only for Sharu to cut him off. I'll repeat what I just said. I think you two go with him. Sharu said looking at the blonde male in front of him. You're not coming. Fu asked looking at the male in front of her. If he really is who he says he is, then training with him is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's not something you should pass up. But in this case, I have two. If we all three went, it'd be just like the Chunin exam. I'd just be holding the two of you back, Sharu said, looking at the two in front of him. Na was about to speak to the male, but before he could, Sharu held up his hand and looked at the male in front of him. Yes, I realize what I'm saying. Yes, I've thought this through. Yes, I know what this means for us. And yes, I do have a plan for myself. Sharu said looking at the male in front of him answer all the questions he knew Naruto was going to ask. Hearing this, Naruto looked at him surprised and Sharu looked up at the two. Don't worry, I'll be fine. It's because I've thought out each scenario that I'm saying this. I'm not returning to Taki. I'll find my own method of training, one where I can utilize this Keki Genka of mine. Then Sharu said as he stood up, we'll meet back here again. This exact town, this exact room, this exact spot. In exactly 3 years, Sharu said, looking at the two in front of him. The room was silent for several minutes as the three looked at each other. Na sighed hearing this and looked at the male in front of him. Are you sure about this? Na asked, looking at the male in front of him. Sharu nodded hearing this and Na sighed. Then I guess we'll meet in 3 years. Na said looking at the male in front of him. Sharu seemed shocked to hear this and Na smiled seeing his expression. What? Don't seem so surprised. I trust your judgment completely. If you think this is what we should do, then I'm not going to argue. Na said looking at the male in front of him. Sharu smiled hearing this and the three stood up. I guess this is where Team 12 finally splits up. Fu said looking at the two in front of her. It's not going to be forever. It's just 3 years, Sharu said, looking at the two in front of him. Yeah, it'll be over before we know it, Naruto said. Fu nodded, reassured by this, and the two left the room. Sharu sighed seeing this and watched as the two walked down the streets. I have to become stronger for them. If not, then I'll be nothing but a burden on them, and that's not what I want, Sharu thought to himself as the two disappeared from his sight. As the two walked down the streets, Naruto and Fu once again began to hold hands, and Naruto looked at his mint-haired companion, giving her a smile to try and reassure her. I'm sure he'll be fine, Naruto said confidently, and Fu couldn't help but nod in agreement after hearing his confident tone as they walked into the bar. The elderly male looked at the two and was about to stop them, seeing how young they were, but stopped seeing the headbands they were wearing and let them walk past him. When they did, they almost immediately spotted the elderly male from before. As they approached the male, he leaned forward with a smile and looked at them. So, the male asked, looking at him, waiting for a response. We're coming, Na said, looking at the male, causing his smile to widen. Great, the male said in a booming voice as he looked at the two in front of him. Just one question. What about that other friend you mentioned? Jiraiya asked, looking at the two in front of him. He's not coming, Fu said bluntly, looking at the male. I see, Jiraiya said as he stood up. Then we don't have any time to waste. Let's leave as soon as we can, Jiraiya said as he walked out of the building with the two following behind him. We're going to make a quick stop somewhere. We want to say goodbye to our friend, Fu said, looking at the elderly male, who nodded and began to follow the two as they began to lead. When they finally arrived at the same building as before, they noticed that Sharu had already left their room. Maybe he's in his room, Naruto said as he turned around and opened the door to his room only to see that it was empty as well as oddly clean. As if Sharu had cleaned it before he left. Na sighed seeing this and looked at Fu. He might be at the park, Na said looking at the female, knowing that she wanted to give the male one last farewell before they left the city. No, Fu said, looking at the blonde male in front of her. If he's already left, then I doubt he at the park. We should follow his example and leave as well, Fu said, looking at Naruto. The blonde nodded hearing this, but he could hear the small amount of sadness that was in her voice. The two then walked out of the building and rejoined the elderly male and walked out of the town. As they did, Na grabbed Fu's hand and looked at her with his signature smile. It's only 3 years. I'm sure that when we meet again, he'll be just as happy to see us, Na said, looking at the female, causing her to smile. Yeah. Plus Fu began as she leaned her head on Naruto's shoulder. At least I'll still have you, the female said, looking up lovingly at her blonde companion as they left the village. With Shiryu, the white-haired male was currently walking down a small section of the forest. He planned on going to a small company that his family owned to see what it had to offer him. However, as he was walking, he heard someone talking in the distance and walked towards it to see who was. As he came closer to the sound, he noticed that there was also the sound of running water, suggesting that whoever was in the woods was by a river. When he arrived, he saw 2 males, and just as he thought the 2 were by a small river. However, what he wasn't expecting was who was standing there. One seemed normal enough with onyx eyes and jet black hair. The other, however, was odd, having shark-like features as well as blue skin. However, what made Shiryu immediately recognize them as enemies was what the 2 were wearing. They had on long black cloaks with red clouds on them. Shiryu would have left the 2, but the 2 looked as if they were heading the town he had just come from, which meant they were close to finding Naruto and Fu. Taking a deep breath, Shiryu threw 2 kani at the 2. When he did, the blue-skinned male moved back to dodge the attack, and his partner brought up a hand, easily catching it between 2 fingers. Shiryu gritted his teeth seeing this and looked at the 2 as he came out from the trio. He knew there was no point in hiding. The 2 were S-class criminals after all. They'd probably find someone like him in a matter of seconds. Well, seems like we have someone from Taki trying to delay as Itachi, the shark-looking male said, looking at his partner. However, Itachi was silent hearing this. The blue-skinned male smiled as he looked at Shiryu standing resolutely in front of them. We have enough time for me to have some fun, right? The man asked, looking at his partner. After a few moments of silence, Itachi looked at the male and spoke. He is an enemy, so try not to take too long, Kisame, Itachi said while looking at Shiryu. When he said this, Kisame drew his sword and looked at Shiryu with a bloodthirsty grin before Kisame then ran at Shiryu. To his surprise, despite how the male looked, he was very fast and Shiryu quickly raised his hands, trying to stop the male's attack. However, this had little to no effect as Kisame brought his sword to the side, sending Shiryu into a nearby tree. Before Shiryu could recover, he felt a hand grip around his neck and looked up to see Kisame smiling at him. Did you really think you had a chance at beating me? From what I've seen, you're a novice at best. What makes you think you had any chance of winning? Kisame asked. As his grip on the male's neck tightened, Shiryu raised his hands and his eyes turned gold. Immediately after he did, he launched a punch at Kisame's face. But before his fist could make contact, it was blocked with Kisame's free arm. However, when he did, Shiryu's fist went through the male's arm, turning to water, and a large gust of wind blew the rest of the water away. Shiryu gasped for air when the male disappeared and looked at the now soaked ground a little frustrated. That was a clone. I was getting beat by a half-baked knockoff. Shiryu thought to himself a little frustrated and looked up hearing a laugh from the river. I'll give you credit, kid, from the shockwave that produced that could have really hurt. Seems like fighting you close might not be the best idea, the male said as he ran towards the male. Shiryu quickly got up seeing this and Kisame began to flash through a few hand signs before clamping Toge. Teacher, Sweden, Yugoku Suiro, no Jutsu, Kiss said as he came to a stop and raised his hand. Shiryu tried to jump away seeing this but failed and was soon trapped in a ball of water. Shiryu began to hold his breath seeing this and his eyes once again turned gold before he tried to punch it only resulting in a small ripple appearing on the surface of the outside. Shiryu then threw another punch and another before he continued feeling his lungs starting to burn from lack of oxygen. Damn it, Shiryu thought as he looked at the bubble he was trapped in. I know Uncle said to never go past 5%, but if I don't, Naruto and Fu will. 10% can't be that bad, right? Shirou thought to himself as he once again punched the wall, breaking through it and pulling himself out. However, when he did, Itachi and Kisame both noticed the male's arm. It was now a bright red color, and steam was coming off of it as if it had been scorched. Shirou then took a deep breath and looked at the two in front of him. "Look kid, we're in kind of a hurry, and since I'm feeling generous today, I'll let you leave. There's no point in continuing if you're only going to die," Kisame said, looking at the male in front of him. Damn it, he was right. I don't have a chance against them. This fight is more than one-sided, but if I don't do something, then they'll find. That's it, Shirou thought to himself as he rose from the ground. "I don't care. I'm not letting you get your hands on Naruto and Fu," Shirou said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, Kisame seemed a little shocked and with a slightly more serious expression looked at the male in front of him. "Those are the names of the Gingariki we're after, right?" Kiss asked, not taking his eyes off Shirou. "Yeah," Itachi said bluntly in his usual monotone voice. And Kisame sighed as he grabbed his sword and pointed it at the male in front of him. "Tell us where they're and maybe you'll consider letting you live," Kisame said, looking at the male in front of him. Shirou mentally smirked hearing this and looked at the male as he got up holding his still injured arm. Glad to see they bought it, Shirou thought as he gave the male a confident smirk. "If you want to know, then you'll have to catch me first," Shirou said as he leaned down, his eyes turning gold in the process, and began to dash through the woods, taking as many turns as he could to confuse the males as much as he could. Kiss gritted his teeth, slightly upset hearing this, and looked into the woods. For a kid, he sure does move fast, Kisame said as he began to walk into the woods with Itachi following behind him. With Na and Fu followed the elderly male for hours before they came to a stop. "Well, reach the town we're going to in 3 days. Until then, I suggest you rest. Once we arrive there, well, begin your training. But for now," the male said as he pulled the giant scroll off his back and opening. "I'd like the two of you to write your names down in blood," Jiraiya said, looking at the two. When he said this, the two nodded and bit their thumbs before writing the names on the paper. When they did, Jiraiya performed a few hand seals before slamming his hand on the ground, and a toad with a scroll on his back appeared. Jiraiya looked as if he was about to speak. However, before he could, the toad raised its hand and looked at him. "Before you say anything, we can't sign Naruto Uzumaki," the toad said, looking at the male in front of him. Na and Fu were both surprised by this, and even Jiraiya had to admit that he didn't expect this to happen. "Why not?" Jiraiya asked, looking at the small creature in front of him. The frog then reached around, grabbing his scroll and looked at it. "According to this, another summons has already claimed him. Of course, if he were to refuse this, then we could sign him. But until then, his contract with them still stands," the toad said, looking at the elderly male in front of him. And Jiraiya turned his attention to the blonde beside him. "So, who's your contract with?" Jiraiya asked, looking at the blonde. When he asked this, Na seemed a little nervous and looked at him. I don't know," Na said, looking at the male in front of him. Jiraiya at first was skeptical of the male's answer, but something about his tone convinced him was telling the truth. "Well, then perform the summoning technique and find out," Jiraiya said, looking at the male. When he said this, Naruto nodded and bit his thumb before performing the hand seals required. "Kushio's no jutsu," Na yelled as he slammed his hand onto the ground. When he did, a familiar figure appeared in front of him. A small fox that he had spent weeks looking for after it had disappeared and he had thought died. "Kitsun," Na said to himself, looking at the fox in front of him. To Fu, it seemed like just an ordinary fox, but Na remembered the creature perfectly, and he could tell it hadn't aged a bit. "It's good to see you again, Na," the creature said, looking at him. "Sorry about this. You must be confused. Allow me to explain. I'm sure you remember when we first met and how I immediately bit you after you saved me. Well, using the blood I got from biting you, I forged your name and waited until you eventually tried to summon to reveal myself," the fox said, looking at Na. When he said this, Na smiled, happy to see the fox again and glad to see that even after all these years, he remembered who he was. "Of course, I understand if you want to cancel the contract because of me tricking you, but I'd be very happy if you finished it," the fox said, looking at Na. The blonde nodded hearing this, and the fox smiled, and he pulled out the scroll on his back and rolled it out in front of him. "All I need is your fingerprint in your blood," the fox said, looking at the male beside him. Naruto nodded hearing this and once again bit his thumb before placing it on the scroll, and Fox smiled before rolling it back up. "By the way, my real name is DVOs," the creature said before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Jiraiya smiled seeing this and looked at the two in front of him. "And to think I thought the Fox contract was nothing more than a rumor," Jiraiya said, looking at the two in front of him. Jiraiya then sighed and shrugged his shoulder before turning to the toad. "Well, since Na already has a contract, we'll just have Fu sign," Jiraiya said, looking at the small creature, and it nodded before rolling out a scroll, and Fu once again signed the contract. Then, just like the fox, the creature disappeared in a puff of smoke. Jiraiya then smiled and looked at the two. "All right, now you two get some sleep and remember, I will be nearby, so don't do anything too dirty," Jiraiya said as he began to walk away before stopping himself. "Actually, you know what? I take that back. You two have lots of fun. I could use some new material for my book," Jiraiya said as he walked away with a perverted smile on his face. Naruto and Fu both blushed hearing this and slowly moved towards each other before laying down and slowly falling asleep. With Shiryu sighed as he looked at the small fire in front of him. He knew that having a campfire was a bad idea since he still had those two after him, but he thought he had run far enough away to keep them from finding him. Shiryu then looked at his hand, which was now covered in bandages, and closed his hand, frustrated with himself. He hadn't even lasted 5 minutes against one of them. If Na and Fu were there, they might have actually beat him. Shiryu thought to himself as he looked at the fire. As he looked at it, a sudden loud crashing sound brought him back to his senses. Looking to his side, he immediately spotted a giant dragon made of water moving towards him. His eyes widened seeing this, and before he could move, he was hit with the attack and sent through several trees. When the dragon finally disappeared, he looked up to see the same, too, as before looking at him. "Itachi, do me a favor and keep the brat from escaping again," Kisum said as he walked towards the male. When he did, Shiryu saw Itachi's eyes change and start to spin. When he did, Shiryu saw several dead bodies in front of him and began to panic. The first few were people he cared about, being Naruto, Fu, and his uncle. Then it slowly progressed to people he recognized and then faceless bodies. "This has to be a genjutsu," the male thought to himself as his eyes turned gold and he punched his side, letting out a loud cracking sound. Shiryu then looked to see Kisum about to swing at him and held up his arms seeing this, and like before, the male was hit by a tree. Before he had the chance to escape, he felt a sharp blow on his side and felt his chakra being drained from him. Shiryu then quickly moved before once again being pinned to a tree by Kisum. "Now where are the Jinchuriki?" Kisum asked looking at the male in front of him. Shiryu started to laugh slightly hearing this. "I don't know which is funnier, the fact you couldn't tell I was lying or the fact you think I'd tea. LL, even if I did know where they were," Shiryu said looking at the male in front of him. When he said this, Kisum tightened his grip on his neck and looked at him. "So this was all a waste of our time?" Kiss asked glaring at him. "That's right," Shiryu said with the same arrogant smirk on his face. "This was nothing but a way to waste your time. I'd never tell the two of you where they were. So go ahead and kill me if you want. I'd never betray someone important to me, and I'd do anything to protect those I love, even take on tea. The entire world," Shiryu said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, Itachi found himself being slightly intrigued by the male and once again used a genjutsu on the male. When he did, Shiryu felt a massive pain in his head. And Kisame turned to Itachi, seeing the male's expression. "So, you want him dead, too, huh? Well, then I won't waste any time," Kisum said as he took the male and slammed him into the ground before he began to repeatedly stomp on the male's face. Shiryu then felt another pain in his head, this time followed by the word, "run," in Itachi's voice. Kisum then picked the male up and punched him in the face before throwing him up in the air and slamming him back into the ground. Naruto, Fu, Uncle, Shiro thought to himself as he slowly looked up at the blue-skinned male that was walking towards him. "I will," Shiro thought as he once again tried to raise himself off the ground. However, before he could kick Shiryu, sending him into a tree, and laughed as he watched the male fall to the ground. Shiru held his side as he slowly rose from the ground. Protect you, Shiru thought to himself as he looked at Kisum. Because Shiru said to himself as he looked at Kisum. When he said this, Kiss looked at him confused for a second before he watched the white-haired male full raise from the ground with a desperate look on his face. We're friends, Shiru once again said to himself as tears began to fall from his eyes. Kisame stopped himself completely seeing the male's expression, and Shiru once again continued his desperate plea. Trying to dig deep inside of him to find the power that Fu and Naruto always managed to find. They're very important to me, Shiru said, looking at the male in front of him. Kisame then smiled hearing this and once again began to walk towards the male. Shiru then once again felt an even more intense pain in his head, forcing him to WSE in pain. Then, like before, he once again heard Itachi's voice echo in his head. Run, shut up, Shiru said, looking at the two in front of him. Kisame, assuming that he was referring to something he was seeing fr. Itachi continued to walk towards the male in front of him. Then, like before, the same pounding pain returned and Itachi's voice rang in Shira's head. Run, run, run. Shiru once again began to hold his head, hearing this, and looked at Kisame as he finally grabbed his sword. I'm not going to listen to you, Shiru screamed as the pain continued. Kisame once again laughed slightly hearing as he continued his slow walk towards Shiru. I'll leave the head but slaughter the rest, Kiss said as he began to raise his sword. Run, Ataki's voice once again said in the male's head. I don't want to lose them, Shiru said as he began to argue with the voice inside of his head. Shiru then once again slowly looked up at the two in front of him and Kisame began to run towards him. Run, Ataki's voice said, looking at the two in front of him. They are, Shiro began. And before he could finish the same pain returned, bearing the same voice as before. Run, Itachi said as Kisame grew closer to him. My very, Shiru thought only to once again have the same voice as before interrupt him. Run, dear friends, Shiru thought to finish his line of thought to himself as he watched Kisame raise his sword. Wait, Itachi said, looking at the two in front of him. When he said this, Kisame stopped and turned to his partner with a somewhat irritated look. Itachi then looked at the young white-haired male in front of him. You really care about them, don't you? Itachi asked, looking at the male in front of him. Of course I do, Shiru said, looking at the male in front of him. Hearing this only further justified what Itachi knew to be true. He knew what it was like to have someone you do anything to protect, even if it meant hurting them in the process. How would you like me to train you? Itachi said, looking at the young male in front of him. When he said this, Shiru looked at the male in pure disbelief. Be trained by him, by his enemy. However, before the male could respond, Kisame looked at Itachi. What are you saying? Kiss said looking at him. He said it himself. He doesn't know where they went. However, they do know each other, and from what I saw in his mind, they are fairly close. They will meet again. This way, even if it does take time, he will eventually lead us to them. Plus, you and I are no strangers to betraying people we work with. I'm sure it'll be much easier knowing we'll eventually have to kill him, Itachi said, looking at his partner. Kisame sighed hearing this and looked at the male. Fine, but only because it's more fun to break people than actually kill them, Kisame said, smiling at the thought of hearing the male scream again in pain and agony. Itachi then turned to Shiru and looked at him. So, how about it? Itachi asked, looking at the male in front of him. Shiru looked at the man for a moment and gritted his teeth, hearing the male's offer, but sighed, knowing that he was out of options. Fine, Shiru said, looking at the male in front of him. Itachi then turned around and began to walk away with Kisame following behind him. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.